Good evening. A very, very warm welcome to each and every one of you or there in Radio Land, at home and abroad on Facebook, if you're there, at YSQFM or at Q95 FM Radio. Uh, Please share the live and invite your friends to join the Q family right now. Get the latest breaking local, regional, and international news and happenings. We certainly want to acknowledge you on the several other online streaming platforms. This is the Global View on Q. It is Tuesday, 26 October, and it is just a few minutes, so about 5 minutes or so after 7 in the studios at Q95, the big station. It is the 41st Tuesday of 2021. And I'm your host, Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G, and I have some very distinguished guests with me tonight. I want to say a very special, warm welcome to Pastor St. Clair Mitchell, who is out there in Washington, D.C. I'm very happy that he could join us tonight. I'm pretty sure that he will add a lot of substance to our conversation here tonight. Also, my other distinguished guest, Dr. Irving Andre. He's in Dominica, and political scientist, Dr. Dion George, is in Atlanta. Alvin Knight, Alvin Thomas, who is in Georgia, will be joining us shortly. And so we are continuing the discussion on the topic issues and pitfalls facing fledgling democracies in small island developing Caribbean states like Dominica, and the way forward for the governance of our people and our societies, the imperative for greater political education among our youth and adults, modern electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations. We know we've been saying there's a need for that, like it has been a need in every other country in the Caribbean for that matter, and eliminating the notion of big private special interest money of unknown origin from election campaigns, with some focus on the upcoming by-election in our own Grande constituency, following the passing of our beloved MP Edward Regis of blessed memory. So we look at these issues of likability, of bribery, of treating what commonly known in local parlance as CO and dependency on handouts and on gifts and things versus question of knowledge and experience and competence and accountability, transparency. We also examine the critical role of our universities, our colleges, our intellectuals, the whole question of sustained advocacy for free speech, access to public sector information, the impacts of religion and religious beliefs, strengths and weaknesses of the private sector, of our trade unions and other agencies, the fear of intimidation, of victimization, of oppression and repression, pushback on political cult culture and narcissistic type of leadership. We've seen those in the Caribbean for some time, for many years. We still see them today. We'll examine the imperative for political education, modern electoral and campaign finance reforms and regulations, laws and regulations, and really eliminating this big money out of our politics, wherever it is. We will discuss the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dangerous. We also, I'm sure, will take a look at the populist leaders in the Caribbean. We did have a start to discuss that last week, but we'll take a little dig at it again this time, because it's important that we revisit that when we talk about likability. The erosion of human rights under populist leaders and what kind of leadership qualities we need today in Dominica and the Caribbean. So we will, in fact, attempt to examine the way forward by looking into the rearview mirror at the lessons learned from the era of various leaders in the Caribbean and the ominous trends of nolly-process democracy. We've seen that happening recently in our region. So what can Dominicans and friends of Dominica at home and abroad do to help preserve any such worrisome trends? Again, I have to tell you, I'm totally delighted to have Dr. Irving Andre, Dr. Dion George, Alvin Knight will be joining us in a few, and Pastor St. Clair Mitchell with us tonight. So we make recommendations as usual for the way forward. No anger, no malice, no personal attacks, no vilification, no divisiveness, just simply bringing back civility, peace and love, a caring society and good governance for Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. So wherever you are in Dominica, in the region or globally, please join the conversation. Join us right now and stay tuned to this space get the answers to your questions on the Global View on Q and have your say, as you do every Tuesday with me, Mr. G, only on Q95, the big station. So as usual, just want to reach out and say a heartfelt thank you to our healthcare providers and frontline workers. I'm sure, and I always say this, that I'm sure they all continue to be totally exhausted, but I expect that they will keep on trucking on and keep on working to help stem the rising tide in this escalating and expanding deadly coronavirus situation in Dominica. So I urge you to please follow the correct advice, guidelines, and protocols, play it safe, and stay alive. So happy to have you with us tonight, wherever you are in your neck of the woods, in the region, and in the global community. Our engineer, Sherwin Norris, as usual, is keeping us on the air, and Lambert Charles is on the console at Q95 directing the traffic. He will direct your calls to us a bit later. So let's get started. And as we do, I want to go over first to Dr. Irving Andre to start the ball rolling and get the conversation going. We will not all, as we always say, we will not all necessarily see everything the same way. We will not always agree on everything. And our listeners, as usual, our social media followers and callers are free to differ with anything that we say here tonight or anything that we say on any night in this show. But certainly we can all agree to disagree respectfully. And there is always room for differing points of view in any event. I also look forward to hearing in a few minutes of opening comments from Dr. Dion George, Pastor Sinclair Mitchell, and Mr. Alvin Thomas, following Dr. Andre. So, Dr. Andre, let's go over to you to get the ball rolling.
Well, let me thank you for your excellent introduction. Let me commend the other panelists. These are all distinguished folk. Alvin Thomas, Dr. Sinclair Mitchell, Dr. George. At least we are very fortunate to have these folks in our midst, and we are very fortunate to be able to refer to them as Dominicans. This is obviously a vexing topic, but it is a very relevant topic. And let me start by borrowing a line from Shakespeare when he said in one of his tragedies that, quote, "There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face." In other words, the fact that someone may be smiling, someone may have lovely dimples, someone reaches out and someone delivers brown paper bags in the evening or yellow paper bags in the evening, that, quite frankly, should not be the test of true leadership or the test of likability. We are a sophisticated young island nation. We have to assess these things in a more profound fashion. And I think, in my respectful view, we have to continue to engage this topic because it is very relevant to our particular situation. Let me put this discussion within a certain context in Dominica. I think here's the argument which has been presented on behalf of this issue of likability. What the argument is this, that likability is an important factor in terms of political leadership. Let me say at the onset that I agree with that totally. The other factor which has been advanced is that perhaps the leader of the position is not likable sufficiently, and hence that has been an impediment in terms of him making any political breakthrough. That has been advanced by many persons. And let me indicate from the onset that at this juncture, what has not been discussed are the other important factors that are relevant to this issue of likability. What the hell do I mean by that? Let us hypothetically assume the following. In a very toxic political environment, where one political entity is inciting violence against the opposition, one political entity is telling its supporters to throw hot water on the opposition when they come to obviously to campaign. One political entity hypothetically is telling the people of Westfield that blood will be on your hands if you vote for the opposition. Members of one political entity is indicating that someone should just do away with the leader of the opposition. One political entity is systematically charging, weaponizing the criminal law against the legitimate opposition. One political entity, quite frankly, is depriving members of the government, the opposition, depriving them of their legitimate income. Here's my question. How can you, with a straight face, indicate that the opposition is not likable within that context of systemic and systematic victimization and persecution? How can you seriously take that position within that context? And therein, in my view, lies the problem. You can't talk about likability if one political entity is being savaged by the political directorate. We cannot, and that's my position. While likability is a factor, but in this context that I've outlined to you, likability is not the factor that has accounted for the lack of relative success of the opposition. We have to have a candid discussion instead of simply blaming the character traits of the leader of the opposition. We have to take a candid look at those policies, those steps, those measures being perpetrated against the opposition and say that, look, how can people like the opposition if that is what is being done to them? How can you be, in my view, taking that position seriously? In my view, it's an untenable proposition. Likability may be a factor if all things are considered equal. If, for example, the parties are fighting on an equal playing field, if the parties are competing equally for the support of the electorate. But when one political entity is allowed to manipulate the electorate by a systematic and by an illegal importation of voters, then in my view, the whole question of likability becomes moot. It is a non-issue. What is important, as I indicated sometime last week, what is of significant importance is the extent to which we as a society, we adhere to the rules, the electoral rules of the state. As long as one side can violate those rules with impunity, as I said, the whole issue of likability is a red herring. And I should indicate, Mr. Gregoire, somebody corrected me. They sent me a WhatsApp and saying, Gaston, Andre, you should refer to Dominican phrases as opposed to red herring. You should say that instead of red herring, that in fact, the issue of likability is a balau fue. Now, Mr. G, whether that's true or not, I don't know. Whether that is the equivalent of red herring, I don't know. But let me indicate that within this context I've outlined, the whole question of likability is a balau fue. And that is my introduction. Thank you.
Yes, but I would not put too much emphasis. Remember, I'm a guy who from Granby. I like my balafwe. So don't try to. You know, I intend to come back as we go along and put all of this question of likability within the context, the framework of our democracy, our fledgling democracy, because it is important for us to do that. And when we come to look at personalities within our democracy, I mean, the framers of our constitution probably had envisaged that, okay, we're going to have a lot of decent people who will abide by the laws and so on. Hopefully, they put some checks and balances, but in many cases in the Caribbean, it does not appear that that's enough. Many politicians and many leaders are having their way, you know. So, but because you started on the question of likability, I think I want to go over to Pastor St. Clair Mitchell, because I know the last time that we had that discussion, he had a view, he had a perspective on it, and I really would like to hear it, you know. And I would like to give him a full opportunity to hear his views on it, because I think maybe the last time when he called, he did not really have much time to express and explain. So Pastor Mitchell, let me go over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gregoire, for having me on this evening. And you correctly said that the last time I called, I thought that the time was not afforded me to explain the point that I was making, which I still believe to be factual and to be true. Um, and I tried calling back several times, and I want to thank you for the conversation we had, you and Gabriel and I, after the broadcast, and also the conversation we had with Mr. Andre after the broadcast. I agree with most of what Mr. Andre just said a moment ago as it relates to character. And I think he agrees with me also. I don't think we need to respond to things from purely an emotional level. It is a fact. It is a fact that likability is one of the factors that helps to determine the outcome of elections. It is a fact all over the world, and that cannot be disproven. The fact that character and all of those other virtues are also considered is a fact, but you don't have to have one and sacrifice the other. It is a fact that and that's the point that I was making when I talked the other day. I said, and I do want to correct the record on that. I said it shouldn't be a factor in a perfect world where you have perfect beings who make judgments totally based on character. But that is not the case. Not the case in Dominica. It's not the case anywhere in the world. It's not the case in Canada, where Mr. Andre lives or where you live. And I don't, my other brother here, maybe in the United States. We don't live in a perfect world. And in this imperfect world that we live in, likability does in fact play a role. As to the extent of the role that it plays, we don't know. They would have to make some kind of a scientific survey and come to a factual conclusion on the matter. And I should also say, when Gabriel, I call him Gabriel, he's my friend, he's also my attorney here in the United States. But when he called back to clarify what I said, I want to make it clear that my conversation was not about $7,000 suits or houses on a hill. I don't even know about those things. I think he was doing a good job as being my defender because he defends me if ever I have to be in the court. But the point that I made is the point that I make tonight, that likability shouldn't be a factor in a perfect world. But in this world that we live in, it is a factor. And when I say that, I say it as a matter of fact, not attaching any personalities in Dominica to this fact. I don't put a face and say, well, this person is likable, this person is not likable. I state that as a fact. And the other thing I'd like to correct is the idea that Jesus was likable. Jesus was not a likable person, not on any stretch of the imagination. So I also want to correct that. But I do stand by what I said, that likability is in fact considered in most cases when people make decisions about who they will choose to be their leader, whether it's in a nation, whether it's in just a small group, whether it's in a trade union. Likability is a factor, and that cannot be disputed. I mean, everything you read about it by those who know more about that particular subject than we do will tell you. Any research that you've done, any serious research would tell you that likability is a factor. Now, I understand that we may have certain preferences, political preferences, that is, those of us on the panel and those people who are listening. And so because in their mind, the likability issue plays itself out in the personalities that run for election in Dominica, we seem to want to take the position that best fits the party that we support. And I think that's the wrong way to argue the point or to come to a reasonable and factual conclusion. But I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be here tonight.
No, I'm very happy to have given you the opportunity. On this program on Q95 generally, I think we always like to have all views, all ideas, content. And so we're very happy to have every view. I mean, it's very important that we do that. This is, in fact, that's why I always go back to the notion of democracy. I mean, we have to allow all ideas to content. But I do recall, though, Pastor Mitchell, that at that time when you called, you did, when you were talking likability, you did make a reference to Lennox Linton and said maybe the opposition might want to consider.
Yeah, what I was saying was because it was clear that people were speaking from certain political perspectives. So I'm saying if your side is the losing side, you would have to ask yourself some questions. Why did we lose? And we would have to consider, in coming to a reasonable conclusion, we would have to consider whether or not likability played a role. I mean, the margin by which a party loses could be the likability margin. And so hence the reason why I made that observation, but it had nothing to do with him as a person. I don't know him very well at all. So it is not my place to say whether or not he's likable or not. That is for the people to decide whether or not likability played a role. I'm not saying it did. I'm just saying it is for the people who support that political party and who desperately want that political party to be in office. You would have to, if you have any sense, I think you would have to consider every element that leads to a successful outcome in an election. You would have to consider that if you want to be objective and you want to win at the polls, maybe the next time.
So, yes, all of the great points. I'm supposed to go over to Dr. Dion George now, but I really want to go back to Dr. Andre, because I like the fact that we're hearing an argument on a particular point and we're hearing all sides of the story. So I think what I'm hearing, both from Mr. Mitchell and from Dr. Andre, is that yes, likability is always a factor. And we know it's not a perfect world. It's always a factor. The question is, in Dominica's particular circumstance, I think that is what Dr. Andre was saying. And he looked at a number of circumstances that are existing circumstances and was saying, how much weight does likability carry? For example, if you have enough money to transport voters and put them there, I mean, likability is good, is a good factor. I mean, it's always important. It's good to be liked. If you're liked, obviously makes it easier. But what if you also have a lot of money? So if you put the show on the other foot, for example, and I'm going to put it there, let me put it this way, because you had mentioned Linton, Pastor Mitchell. If, for example, Linton was in office and Mr. Skerritt was in the opposition, and Linton is the one who had all the money, and he was able to bring in all these people, I wonder how much weight would likability carry? Dr. Andre might want to make a comment on it.
Mr. G, as usual, you've hit the nail on the head, to be quite frank with you. In fact, I was wondering if you have a sledgehammer in your hands. I am not disputing that likability is a factor, but that is not the issue. The issue is to what extent is it a factor within the context of Dominica, where you have this type of imbalance in terms of funding for elections, where you have persons whose allegiance are being purchased by being given yellow bags in the middle of the night, by being given brown paper bags in the middle of the night, where you have persons who are benefiting flagrantly from the coffers of the state. Then how can we, with a straight face, suggest that likability is a significant factor in terms of the results of the election?
Can I interject here? I've never used the word significant here tonight. I said like.
Yeah, but I really hope you let me finish my point. I never said that. I never said, Dr. Mitchell, that you said that.
Okay.
I just want to be able to finish my point.
Okay, go ahead.
And then you can challenge me if you so choose, and hopefully I'll get an opportunity to rebut. That is my point. The issue is, what is the significance of a likability in terms of Dominica's elections? That is the fundamental issue. I never said at no time that it was not a factor, but that is not the issue. The issue is, what is the extent of that factor within the context of where elections are skewed to such an extent, where the voters list is bloated, where persons have been able to fly to Dominica, 16 jets at the Melville Airport. We've never seen so many jets at the Melville Airport in the history of that airport. Don't ask me where they got the money to come to Dominica from. Don't ask me where they got the money to leave Dominica as soon as they voted. That is my point, Dr. Mitchell. Within that context, where the electoral laws are being violated so flagrantly, likability is not a significant factor. That is the point I'm making. And you never said, well, I certainly never heard you mention the word significant, but that is the point I am making.
And the point that I'm making is it is a factor, and that cannot be disproven. And I think you agree with me that it is a factor.
I agree with you,
The
absolutely.
reason why I called the radio station was not to talk about the other issues that you guys had brought to the table. I listen almost every Tuesday to the broadcast, and I must say I find that you guys are possess great intellectual capital. You're very learned men, and you know the fact that I'm sitting here with you tonight is a very humbling experience. I don't know that I rightly deserve a seat at that table, but I called to talk about one thing, and that was likability. I didn't call to speak about any of the other issues, and hence tonight, my contributions will stay in the area that I called to talk about, and I was afforded an opportunity this evening to clarify myself. And so I will stay with that when things are spoken about the subject of leadership, which I I hope I am one, and hopefully a good one. I may make some contributions here. I would prefer to be solution oriented than to just say what the problems are, because just saying what the problems are is not going to bring a solution to those problems. And I think leaders, by their very nature, are solution oriented. I tell the people that I am fortunate and blessed to lead that we are a congregation of leaders and not a congregation of followers. Followers are people who see problems and talk about them. Leaders are solution oriented. They see the problem, but they come up with solutions for the problems, which is what I was hoping my contribution would have led to, and that it was, what can we do to help educate our people? What can we do to maybe neutralize the effect of likability as a factor in determining elections? And so I think that would be a lot more substantive, and it would be a lot more educational, and it would contribute to the development of the younger minds in our country. You know, as for people voting from outside and whatnot, I'm a Dominican, and I love Dominica. I go to Dominica 3-4 times a year, and I have my own views about people from outside voting and how that should be done. Nevertheless, I am all for obeying the laws as they are on the book, because I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Now, here's the thing, Dr. Pastor Mitchell. Yes, I think leadership, and we'll come to leadership, it has to be results oriented. I mean, you have to be a results oriented person, but I mean, a solution oriented person. But in order for you to find a solution to a problem, I think it's important for you to know what the problem is.
I agree, totally.
Yes. And so it is very difficult to ignore those other issues because they are problems. And these problems are not unique just to Dominica, you know. Let's not forget that.
I totally agree.
We've seen many countries in which those things happen. We know for a fact that Jamaica had a real problem until they decided to amend the electoral laws and the campaign finance laws and so on. And now their things are going much more smoothly. I remember a few years ago, there was this gangster chap, I think he's in jail somewhere in New York, or United States somewhere. I mean, there was a lot of trouble around the time. And then suddenly things are moving much more smoothly. You're not hearing all this problem about big money in the Jamaica thing because they have to provide accountability for whatever campaign funds they use. So we're going to come back to that. But I'm just making the point to say that it is almost impossible. All of us who are leaders or managers will know you cannot solve a problem without knowing what the problem is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's important for us. We cannot ignore or pretend as if we don't know something is happening. We have a good manager will say, listen, like it or not, it's happening. Let me face that and let me do something about it. We cannot sweep it under the carpet because it never solve the problem. So I think it's important for us to always, I mean, we have to do it in a manner that is fair and factual and balanced.
Right.
But it's something that needs to be done. It's never a good thing to sweep it under the carpet and pretend it does not exist. So I don't think any of us here want to do that, certainly. But Dr. Dion George, I'm just a guy from Granby that's trying to put my 2 cents. You know, Pastor Pastor Mitchell made a comment there about he not being up to par with some of the brains in this room there, but I'm the least of the apostles, and I use the word apostles in a very learned way. Because so, Dr. George, I really want you to, because you see, we have to put this thing in context, right? It has to be in context. I mean, look, we're not in isolation in the world, We are just, if you look at the globe, the map, you'll see Dominica, a little speck there. If you zoom this thing out, you hardly see Dominica. We're 20 miles long, approximately by 10 miles wide. That is what we are. Nice piece of land there, nice real estate, nice green, nice water, nice air quality, nice soil. But that is what it is with 70,000 people. I mean, we're not a big thing, a big factor in the world scheme of things. But the point is that as a people, as a society, we have to find a way to live together. It should have been so much easier if you have 70,000 people to live together in harmony on this little piece of rock. But for some reason, we can see too much, all that divisiveness. I mean, families against families, brothers against brothers, and sisters against sisters. This really is not working for us. And Dr. George, I wanted to help us put this thing, the whole question of democracy, because we are a fledgling democracy, a small island developing state in the Caribbean. And we're trying to find our feet. We're only 43 years old. 7 years from now, we'll be turning 50. We're starting to become old people. So we're going towards 50. I mean, we have to take a look in the rearview mirror, look at all the errors we've made. Why are we not further than we are now? What have we done wrong? What did we do right? What have we done wrong? What mistakes did we make? What lessons can we learn from that? Where do we go from here? How do we correct those mistakes if we made a wrong turn somewhere? Go back and make the right turn and do the thing right, because we're talking about people's lives in a society, right? So I want you to try to help us to put the whole question of this democracy in perspective first, and I'm sure you'll find a way to come back to the notion of likability within our electoral system. And let us bear in mind that we are still waiting. I want to remind all of us, we're waiting now for, well, just about a year now for Sir Dennis Byron, who's supposed to be giving us some recommendations for electoral reforms. And I hope he will also make some recommendations about campaign finance reforms. But so it means that we're going into a by-election, Dr. George, without the reforms. And the Prime Minister said, yes, we're going to have reforms and we're going to ask Sir Dennis Byron to do this. But we're going to by-election without reforms. So what does that mean? Because we know that one of the cases went all the way up to the CCJ. The CCJ took a ruling, it should be heard in the court, but the DPP came and null the case. Cannot be heard. What does that mean going forward? Does it mean that it's going to be business as usual? And then, of course, this grand big by-election is going to be a test for what it could happen going forward into our general election if we still do not have electoral reform. So, Dr. George, let me go over to you.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Gregoire. Thank you very much for inviting me. Special good evening to you, Dr. Michel. It's nice to meet you. Good evening, Dr. Andre. Good evening, Lambi. And good evening to all listeners. Of course, I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion. I want to say a special good evening to the people of Salisbury and Dominica by extension. And of course, I want to thank God for the opportunity to have this discussion. And I want to invite the Holy Spirit to be part of this discussion, that it can contribute, exchanging ideas. But of course, the whole concept of constitutional reform and political economy are two salient topics. And look, tonight we have added a third one, which is likability. I think these should be addressed in the most prudent way. Thus, I think it's important to acknowledge that in one evening for 2 hours, perhaps we might not have enough time to deal with it. But I just want to touch on some of them to deal with it, first of all, from a philosophical way, scientific, and then, of course, to look at some practical, rational solutions. So I will, first of all, talk about the likability issue. I want to see in both Drs. Andre and Dr. Mitchell's position that there is some confluence there. There is some confluence there. And I think it's important, first of all, to identify it from a scientific point of view. In political science, there is something which is called factor analysis. And factor analysis is a practice of condensing many variables into a few variables so that your research is easier to identify which variable weighs heaviest. The theory is that there are deeper factors driving underlying concepts. And so the advantage of factor analysis is that it doesn't consider everything. And so in reference to what Dr. Michel was saying, that everything must be considered, that is true, perhaps in a philosophical way, but in a scientific way where there is a lot of data that has to be analyzed, a factor analysis would remove what is often referred to sometimes as extraneous variables. To Dr. Andre's point, that is not denying that likability is in fact a political, psychological factor in understanding political psychology. But I guess to my point of factor analysis, how much does it weigh? And so the thing that factor analysis does, if we have to consider likability, and then we have to put in all the other variables, what one may find is that there may be contributing factors that weigh heaviest. For example, one might say that the issue of big money in the elections, the issue of incoming voters may have weighed heavier than just likability. One can conclude perhaps in that factor analysis that the issue for the need for electoral reform, cleaning up the voters list, the whole concept of residency, these factors may have weighted so heavy that the issue of likability may have not weighted that much. And so I want to bring in this whole confluence to both of these points in a healthy way that we understand what we're dealing with here in Dominica, right? The other issue that I think is important to discuss is the whole idea of where we are going, because I think Dr. Michel, Dr. Andre, Mr. Thomas, Alvin, and all of us, we are here because we want the best for Dominica. And so moving forward, what would we like to see, right? And so people talk about democracy, right? What sort of democracy do we have and what do we want, right? And so we want what I would consider a participatory democracy. It's a democracy in which people are free to speak, people are free to be part of the law-making process, sometimes in form of referendums or even recall. There's also something which is referred to as a pluralist democracy. That is, you have different groups giving their ideas, different interest groups like the farmers, the businessmen, the different trade unions, being literally part of the decision making. The other part I would like to talk about is something called a protective democracy. What that does, it limits the government. It limits the government such that the government do not, if you will, infringe so much on people's rights. And so a good way to look at it is looking at the Bill of Rights, for example, in the United States, where the First Amendment says, for example, that people have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to assemble, freedom to petition the government. And so when we're doing that, we want to do that with a good look at Dominica. When it comes to the freedom of religion, I don't think we have a problem there. I've never understood or heard that we have a problem with freedom of religion. Freedom of speech, not quite. I mean, somebody might say something on the radio, and of course they can get a lawsuit, things like that. But in terms of freedom to petition the government, freedom to assemble, we cannot forget what happened in Salisbury, right? And so how open is the government to have these protests? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that someone has to catch fire in the streets or to riot, but we do have a right to peacefully assemble, right? And so if we were to go down through the litany of the Bill of Rights, you know, the right not to be searched frivolously, you know, the right to remain silent, the right to a speedy trial, because we keep hearing things about case being processed and persons are getting involved. And so when we speak about a democracy, my recommendation would be this. One, that we would have clear separation of powers. It's not to say that Dominica do not have clear separation of powers, but when one thinks of a judiciary that perhaps is not as independent as it ought to be, that becomes a concern. When one thinks of a head of state that makes decision almost unchecked, that becomes a concern. The other thing I would suggest is term limits. And so this would take us into what one would discuss to be as constitutional reform. I mean, do we want to always remain the same, or can we become better? And if we want better for ourselves and for our children, it doesn't matter which party is in power, whether it's the Labour Party, whether it's the UWP Party. But if we want something that we know that we are just simply individuals, but we have an institution that is functional, then perhaps we want it to be operative and so institutionalized that no one person can host it. And so term limits, I think, is very important. You know, have 2 term limits for the head of state, 2 term limits, perhaps for even ministers and so forth, right? And of course, something else I think that would help our elections, if we have to talk about what are the causes rather of one party losing free election cycles, something maybe to make the playing field perhaps more level, is if we can have set dates for election, some set dates for election, that is the other party can prepare just as well as the incumbent can prepare. And it goes both ways. And so if they were to switch, say, for example, the Labour Party was in the opposition, then that system, that institution will work very well for all parties involved. Mr. Gregoire, on the issue of the Granby election, I think it's a very timely topic. I think it's healthy that we can discuss it. And I also think it is alarming that after approximately a year and more of Sir Dennis Byron survey and of course the expected recommendations on electoral reform, that we have not heard. So I'm not sure if he has submitted it and it has not come out to the public, but what the reality is that here we are having another election without electoral reform. That is one point. Another point I think we have to consider is, so how is it going to be? Is the idea of residency still an issue? Because you recall in several of our previous programs, we have exhausted the topic of cleaning up the voters list, of voters from the diaspora, whether or not they are resident within an area. And our constitution clearly spells out the need for residency, even in the context of Dominica itself. That is, if someone is from Canefield and they have lived Canefield all their lives, can they go up in Granby for election? And I think our constitution says, or rather, there are certain eligibility requirements that must be met. And so I think this discussion tonight is a healthy discussion, and it must be had. And I think I will stop now as my introductory statement.
Yes, and thank you for putting that into the big picture, the big context there. I'm sure we're going to go into a little bit more, we'll delve in a little bit more depth in all of those facets of this democracy thing. But I mean, sometimes we have to, you know, there are these things saying other things being equal, but sometimes we have to look at what is not equal, you know, in this field here. If we are, and as I go to Alvin, let me just make a couple comments here. If we are to look, let us say, at the Granby by-election as an example, we know we're going into it without the benefit of any electoral reforms. I don't think it's going to be time. The election has to take place within 90 days, and I doubt there'll be time to go to Parliament and craft laws and do all kind of things. It seems to me we're going into that by-election without campaign finance reforms or without electoral reforms. So here it is, you have a situation where I'm uncertain because I've not heard any single opposition party in Dominica, established opposition party, say they're going to field a candidate in the Granby by-election. I have not heard that. I've heard one young man who everybody fondly refers to him as Handbag. He's a taxi operator, very popular young man, very vociferous. And he said he is going to challenge the situation. Why he wants to do that? Because again, referring to what Dr. George was saying, the question of race, he's saying the Granby people deserve to choose their own candidate. They don't need to take somebody from St. Joseph and to bring them there. They have enough people from Granby that can do this thing. This is what he's saying. And so he's saying he's challenging the system as an independent candidate. No, we don't know much about how, well, we know the history of some independent candidates. Dr. Andrew will guide us as a historian. There have been independent candidates. One, I think Stanley Fadell was an independent candidate in Granby, and he won more than one election. Was Alvin Kazimi an independent, or did he go up for Freedom Party? I think Juliana Henderson was Freedom Party. But the reason I'm raising that is because we have to look at those things. Things are real things happening in real people's lives in a particular community. We don't know, for example, that the majority of people in Granby do not want Vince. We don't know that, but we don't know whether the minority or the majority want him either. We don't know that. We know they loved Ed Regis. We know they love Pierre Charles. And again, when we come back to that, Alvin, we'll talk about the likability issue because, I remember John Fabian. I remember Piero, a good friend of mine. And these chaps, they didn't last too long. I mean, they got ill, they passed, but they were very likable people, right? The question is, how likable is Vince Anderson in Granby? Maybe he's very likable, maybe he's not. We don't know. Handbag is a very well-known young man there. But Handbag obviously does not have resources. We hear him complaining all the time that they're looking for a stimulus package, the taxi operators, stimulus package from the government. We know he doesn't have much resources. But is it likely that Vin Henderson might have a lot more resources than he has? You see, this is the point. I mean, because it's part of the government machinery, and they have more access to funds than a little guy like Handbag would have on his own. So I'm just drawing that reference to say it is not really an even playing field. Now, let us come back to this point about electoral reform. If we had electoral reform and the Electoral Commission was the one who had the money and said, okay, we're going to allocate these resources to these individuals in that particular way, then we know they would make sure every candidate has resources, and every candidate would have to give an account of the resources, how they spent it and what they spent it for. And every candidate would then have to say, okay, well, in addition to what you gave me, I was able to raise so much money, and I'm going to give an account for what you raised. But we do not have that. So you can see already, Alvin, all this is good in terms of the Granby by-election. But I don't want to restrict your thoughts only to the Granby by-election. Let's get to in the conversation, Alvin.
All right. Thank you, Mr. G. Can you hear me okay?
I'm hearing you very loud and very clear.
Loud and clear. Thank you, Mr. G. And let me also say good night to your listeners, to our listeners at home and abroad, and to, again, my distinguished colleagues here on the panel with me, Pastor Michel. I'm not sure if I'm trying to see if I can recollect the face from, a while back, but bear with me, I'm an old man now, so,
Pastor Mitchell is
age does that. We tend to forget. I'm not like Mr. G that, is quick on that to remember.
Pastor Mitchell is much too young, man. You wouldn't have known him. I mean, he was a young man. You would know him. An old fellow like you expect to know him. Anyway, Alvin.
Tonight, and my good old friend Dion and Irving, and of course Lambi in the house as usual. Lambi. Good evening to everyone, Dominicans at home and abroad listening. It's always, I always consider it a privilege to be afforded that opportunity where I can share some of my views and opinion on topics of such import. And as I always say, I do so, and I would hope to my other panelists there, we're doing so with the intention of influencing some sort of change, bringing about some sort of change. In other words, if all what we say is just for the point of saying it, then it becomes a little more challenging. Not that we should stop, but I'm hoping that whatever we say or whatever we do, in terms of our words and action, is going to bring about a certain change and a certain change of attitude, and hopefully, as a result, to move our country forward. I've heard a lot, said here tonight on the whole question of likability, and as I said previously on the show last week, I think we need to look at this thing in a much broader context. I certainly don't think we can just pull this out and discuss it on its own. And like Irving, I share some of the sentiments expressed by Irving. It's not a question that likability is not a factor. Yes, it's a factor. A number of factors go into the question of a candidate or a person putting on themselves for election: integrity, character, experience, and clearly likability is one of those. But I think given where we are, given the big picture that presents itself to us as a nation, as Dominicans, I think we would be doing a disservice if our focus is purely on the question of whether a candidate or a person vying for office finds is likable or not. There is an article that came out about 2 months ago by a gentleman by the name of Scott B. McDonald. And he writes he's a global American contributor. And he writes on various issues as it affects democracy and the world all over. And that article was captioned "Governance and Electoral Continuity and Change in the Caribbean." And one of the quotes that he started off with, and the source is the Miami Herald. If you source the Miami Herald, you might be able to see some of his current and previous articles. And one of the quotes that he used in that article, if I am permitted to reference it, it says, quote, "Democracy means much more than the right to vote for every man and every woman of the prescribed age. Democracy means recognition of the rights of others. Democracy means equality of opportunity for all in education, in the public service, in private employment. I repeat, and in private employment. Democracy means the protection of the weak by the strong." And you know who said those words? Those words were echoed and spoken by Dr. Eric Williams on his first day as Prime Minister of the newly independent Trinidad and Tobago. And this was done decades ago in 1962. And the question remains, are those words still relevant today? How relevant are those words today? That address was delivered by Dr. Eric Williams in 1962. Do the math, how many years ago? Is that still relevant today? So that's why I'm saying we need to examine and discuss these matters within the much broader context. Let me make reference to another, because it's kind of all conclave in terms of what we are discussing here. The whole question of electoral reform was raised. And that's a very pertinent issue. But more pertinent than that is within the context of electoral reform. What are some of the burning issues? What are some of the ugly heads that we have to ensure that we can remove or terminate? Back in May of 2013, there was what was called a regional forum held on the matter of strengthening regulations of political parties and political financing systems in the Caribbean. And that was a joint effort between the Organization of American States and what is referred to as the Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, IDEA. And Kofi Annan, who was the former Secretary General of the United Nations, he's chair of what is called the Global Commission, and they are partnered with the IDEA, which is the Institute, as I said, for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. And they were having this forum looking at the whole question of electoral reform, and specifically as it relates to financing, political financing, money in politics. And here's what one of the quotes from Kofi Annan. He says there at that forum, for all democracies, rich and poor, old and new, poorly regulated political finance is an important threat to elections with integrity. Rich and poor, old and new. So we're looking at even the United States of America. Those of us who live in the United States of America know that's a huge issue. Campaign financing. We know the Koch brothers, what they do in terms of trying to fund and the lobbyists and all of that. You have this, what you call it, this big Supreme Court citizens by whatever it called, elections where they deem that a corporation should be treated as a citizen, and therefore corporations don't need to disclose what kind of financing they provide to the political party. And we see the same thing, or even in a worst case, happening in our Caribbean, and in particular Dominica. So that is why I'm saying, whether or not the likability thing, who has the deeper pocket and the large ass is going to win likability or no likability. Who pays the piper calls the tune. Who has the money makes the bigger call. And especially where that money is unregulated. Mr. G, you made reference to Jamaica. Jamaica had a serious problem a couple years ago. Guess what? The money was coming in and you didn't even know where that money is coming in. It, quote unquote, alleged could have been coming out from drug lords. So them drug guys who have that kind of money would finance the campaign. When I get into office, you think you can send a drug dealer before a judge? You can't do that. So how does that impact our democracy as young poor nations? So I'm saying so to say that we got to view this thing in a much broader context. And I agree with Pastor Michel that is not a question of just identifying a problem, but coming up with solutions. And I agree with that entirely. And that's why my view is always held that we have to find a way to engage young people. I remember, as I keep saying, in my young revolutionary age, if you might say that, at the age of my 20s and 30s, I was involved in union, I was involved in politics, you name it. We would agitate for change. Protest for change. You know? So we have to get back to that. We have to find a way to engage our young people. And we who have walked that road before have an obligation to do that. There's another document I can refer to, again, speaking on the whole question of financing political campaigns and election campaigns, the current situations and challenges and perspective. And that document was prepared and presented by Cynthia Barrow-Gills. She's a lecturer of political science at Caville campus in Barbados. And it is instructive, some of the areas that were highlighted in there, you know, as far as campaign. And that was done what? Just about maybe 9 years ago, 8 years ago. But I'll say to you, a lot of the issues raised there are just as relevant today as they were back in 2012 or 13, whenever that document was prepared, 2013, you know? So So let's look at that in a more contextualized manner. Let's look at this big picture. You mentioned and you referenced Granby. Quite an interesting scenario developing there right now. I mean, the what you call it, the House of Assembly, Elections Act, the Laws of Dominica, Chapter 2.01, speaks about the manner in which elections are to be conducted. And you know, one of the things that I noticed, and even in the Constitution is striking, that a voter has to be residents in the constituency where they're going to vote. But it is not very clear on the candidate. So a candidate can come from Vickers, put his name up, to go in Granby or Castle Bruce, and to get elected. And very interesting. I mean, that candidate is from Vickers, so he'll vote in Vickers. But it doesn't require him residence in Granby. But the person voting must reside in Granby. Again, I have my learned friend there, Irving, who is certainly, that's his area, more learned than me, could maybe say whether I'm right or wrong, or whether he's familiar with that particular provision. But these are some of the things that, again, impedes our democracy. Because how you tell me, you take a name like the name that's mentioned from wherever, I have nothing personal against the individual, and you send them Granby to represent people in Granby. And you say that's a great democracy. That's democracy at work. You know? That's democracy at work. I mean, you know, I mean, clearly, we got a lot of work to do. And like Mr. G said, I'll wind up, Mr. G, we are on the eve of our 43rd anniversary of independence.
43rd.
43 years as a nation. And we just got 7 more years. Not even a decade. Not even a decade. Normally, nations set their vision and their priority in decades. The decade of the 20, the decade of the 40. Not even a decade. We got 7 more years to get to 50. And the fundamental questions remain. Will we, 7 years from now, dealing and speaking of the same issues? Likability, finance, and all that. So that's all I see now in my opening, Mr. G. I rest for now. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yes, and I will go to Irving next. And before I do, I just wanted to do 2 things. I want to acknowledge all these wonderful people who are with us on Facebook. Quite a few people have joined us already. I can see Michael Alexis. There's Aline Pierre. There's Catherine Fingal. There's oh boy. There's Abby Scotland. There's Maslin Edwards is with us. And lots of comments coming from this. Dave Bertrand. Lots of people are on here with us already, and I'm pretty sure the crowd is going to keep growing. And I hope I'll have a chance to read 1 or 2 of their comments. But Irving, as I go over to you, I wanted to make the point to that this whole question of campaign finance reform, and you can see how important the role is playing in elections. But I don't recall that is part of the terms of reference of Sir Byron. I heard a lot of things that he was looking at laws and some, but I'm not sure that I recall anybody in the official mentioning that it's part of his terms of reference was to look at campaign finance reforms, campaign finance laws and regulations. Maybe you might have some more information than I do on that, but certainly that is one of the points. And then I think it's really, I mean, I'm not sure what happened in the minds of the framers. Why would you want to ensure that the person who's voting in a particular constituency is resident there for a certain period of time, and then yet you don't want to ensure that the person who's going to be they're going to vote for is not resident in that? What is the purpose of being resident if for the voter, if the person who is represented as a candidate is not going to be resident? What is the value in that? I didn't see that. Maybe you can guide us a little bit on that a bit.
With respect to your latter point, I think the justification for the fact that someone offering himself or herself as a candidate in a particular constituency does not have to reside in that constituency. I think the justification is that the electorate should have the unfettered ability to vote for whoever they want as their representative, irrespective of whether or not that person resides in the constituency. In terms of electoral integrity, however, what is paramount is that there are certain rules of eligibility which define who should vote in a particular constituency. So when you, hypothetically, Mr. G, you parachute candidates into certain constituencies to vote, well, actually, you parachute certain voters into certain constituencies to vote, then quite frankly, you are eviscerating the integrity of that election. That's the problem. When hypothetically, persons, whether from New York, St. Martin, are being told, I want you to come to vote, but I want you to vote in a particular constituency, irrespective of how long you've been abroad. That is a criminalization of the process of voting. Now, Dr. Sinclair says something which I disagree with. As much as I admire his contribution, let me say what I disagree with in a very fundamental fashion. He says, quote, saying what problems are will not lead to solutions. Let me repeat it, please. Saying what the problems are will not lead to solutions. Am I missing something here? How can you get solutions to problems that you do not know about? You have to understand what the problems are. And with respect to the whole question of electoral reform, the question is simple. Is the political directorate, do they have the commitment to address or to come up with solutions to the electoral problems that we have? But look at the history, for God's sakes. Look at the OAS recommendation with respect to cleaning up the voters list, with respect to protecting and adhering to the eligibility laws for voting in a particular constituency. What happened to it? It was cast by the wayside. Look at the OAS, I think it was the OAS. I think, look at the report of someone called Dame, what's her name, for God's sakes? The present Prime Minister of Barbados. What happened to her report?
Mia
Motley, for God's sakes. Modio, which proposed electoral reform to address the issues of persons voting in constituencies that where they're not eligible to vote. What happened to it? What happened to the report by CCM, if I recall correctly, and other civic-minded groups and organizations led by, if I recall correctly, Pastor Rodney? What happened to that report? Where is it? What happened to it? Did it disappear? All these reports were cast by the wayside. And then a knight in shining armor, so-called legal luminary, was brought into the picture, Lord Byron, to bring the whole question of campaign finance reform. Well, as Mr. G said, there's no reference to campaign finance reform. So we understand those proposals with respect to the reform. But look at what happened in Jamaica. Look at what happened in Trinidad and Tobago. Look at what happened in Antigua. Look at what happened in St. Vincent. Look at what happened in Grenada. Look at what happened in Barbados in terms of real, honest to goodness electoral reform. Why is it that none of these countries are seeking to have their nationals who lived abroad for decades come in to vote, thereby distorting and destroying the efficacy of the vote of Dominicans or Barbadians resident in their island? What do they know that we don't? Are they just more stupid than us, for God's sakes? No, because they have a scrupulous anxiety to ensure that their electoral process is cleansed any irregularity. And we do not have that commitment. I wonder why. What's so good about it? What's so good about an indefinite tenure in government? Is it because of the monies, the millions that have been secreted outside? The monies which Zampuli told us about? The monies that have disappeared from the face of the earth? Is it because of the glamour of plane loads coming into the island with passengers carrying briefcases filled with what? Dashing leaves? Huh? Are you kidding me? What about these things? How can we not talk about the electoral process without addressing these fundamental problems that are affecting electoral politics? In my respectful view, we have an obligation to talk about those things because they are gangrenous in terms of the health of Dominica's electoral process. That's it.
And I want to go over to, and thanks a lot, Dr. Andre. I want to go over to Pastor St. Clair Mitchell for us to talk a little bit about leadership and some of those issues. I know you know something about that and you would like to talk about that. But I also want you to, maybe if you could, just take a look at one or two other little things, because I mean, it seems to me that we really cannot overlook certain things. I mean, clearly, why is it that we would not include campaign finance reform in terms of reference for electoral reform? I mean, why would we overlook that when every other country in the region has included that, and they've come up with very, very rigid rules, and the systems are working better, the playing field is a little bit more even. Maybe I don't know whether you have some views on that. And the other thing I have to ask is, you live in America. In America, you have fixed term limits. You have a fixed date for election. You have a fixed date when the new government takes over. There's a ceremony, a process of handing over, and so on, which is really solidifies democracy, a peaceful handing over of power. I mean, can you think of any reason why we ought not to have term limits, for example, or a fixed date for election? Because I heard our prime minister say sometime, and prime ministers have been doing that for decades. He said, okay, well, he has the thing in his back pocket, the date or something in his back, but his son has it. I don't think we should trivialize, or maybe he was just making a joke, he was trying to be humorous, but I'm not sure that you should trivialize your electoral process in that way. And then the fact that we don't have term limits, and we hear our prime minister say, I'm planning to be there for 50 years, and maybe I'll hand over to my son. The point is, he might have been making a joke. It is quite possibly as being humorous, but is that the way we want to trivialize our election, our electoral system? I'm not sure that we should do that. So I don't know, maybe you can share with us some of your thoughts on some of those things and the whole notion of leadership, Pastor Mitchell.
Thank you again, Mr. G. And first of all, let me correct something here that was just alluded to by the good judge. I think he wrongly quoted me. He missed one word, and that is the word just. Just saying what the problem is not going to bring a solution to the problem, and that is absolutely correct. I mean, it would be very naive of me to say that saying what the problem is not going to bring about a solution. Obviously, I teach on the law of recognition. And the law of recognition says this: before you can celebrate anyone, you have to recognize that they're worthy of celebration. Before you can confront a problem, you must recognize that there is a problem. So I don't think that I was properly quoted as far as that goes. I said, it's just, we can talk about problems until the cows come home. That's not going to bring a solution. I further enforced my point by saying that in my sphere of leadership, I teach the people I lead to be leaders. And I also said that followers are good at seeing what the problem is. So I think that's taking me totally out of context here. Followers are good at seeing what the problem is. I said leaders see the problems and they come up with solutions to the problems. I further said that when I talked last Tuesday, what I was hoping was that my discussions about the matter of likability would have provoked a greater conversation. For example, one of the things that I think ought to be implemented in our great country is the matter of teaching civics at schools and starting very, very young with our children. And then, like, I grew up, I thank God for what Dominica has afforded me in the field of education. I didn't do very well out there. And I understand. I have totally analyzed the situation. We've got a very high standard, but a very poor system. And I was not prepared to live and work in Dominica. I happen to believe that I was called before the foundations of the earth to be one who paints pictures, not just not with numbers, but with words. They placed me in a science class to study a parallelogram of forces and chemistry. I had no interest in any of those things. I love literature, and I love history, and I love words. And my mother loved literature. So I'm very careful about what I say. I said just saying what the problem is not going to bring about a solution to the problem. But a failure to recognize what the problem is neutralizes our ability to come up with solutions. So I just want to put that on the record that, yes, we have to know what the problem is. But then most of our time shouldn't be spent on saying what the problem is. Most of our time, in my mind, should be spent on coming up with constructive solutions to the problems. And what I would suggest is, in our great country, in my mind, what one of those solutions would be is education, educating our young people, looking at the syllabus at schools, and teaching our children to think critically to be able to deal with the problems that we confront. For example, we talk about people coming from overseas to vote. Why not think of a possible solution being that the opposition and the government would be free to campaign also in America? I'd love to be able to vote in Dominica. I have property in Dominica. I pay taxes there. I pay people who work for me there. So I would love to see a system that afforded me the opportunity to vote, where both opposition and government and other political parties would contend and compete for my vote, with the presentation of their manifestos and all of those things. In my mind, to narrowly say, well, we shouldn't have anybody come from overseas to vote. We are shortchanging ourselves. The question is, do any of us on this panel, do we vote in Dominica? We're here discussing problems in Dominica, but do we even vote there? So we don't, if we don't, and I'm not assuming that we don't, but if we don't, we have no power. We can just talk about the problems, but we can't even cast a vote. I also believe, talking about Granby and the little that I know about it, I think any Dominican should be able to contest elections anyway. This is a small country. I'm a Dominican. And if I live there, and based on the laws, I don't see why I shouldn't be able to go as a candidate in Wesley or Marigot or Portsmouth, for that matter, where I was born and raised, and where the good judge was born and raised. So, I mean, that's my contribution on the matter here. I can't remember what else you asked me. There is something that, for example, I'll tell you this.
I wanted you to make some comments about the leadership question, because I know that you wanted to say something about the whole notion of leadership,
Yeah, well, if you permit me, I listened to a priest today. I think he was in St. Lucia, and he was talking about the role that witchcraft. So we might have to discuss the role that witchcraft plays in elections. But I was surprised that was coming from a Roman Catholic priest. I mean, these people don't even know their own history. They introduced us to all of that stuff. And they were the making of the West Indies, that book that all of us studied in fifth form, tells you the Roman Catholic Church was a political instrument of the Spanish government in the 16th century. That's verbatim, my friend. They taught us all of those things. And now they're washing their hands. And all of the people who are fighting with each other, all of them go to the same church on Sunday morning and worship supposedly the same God and have the same priest. total and absolute confusion. As for leadership, obviously I believe in good I believe in good leadership, and leadership in my mind is influence. It's your ability to influence another person to do something. And I think we need good leadership. We need good leadership in government. We need good leadership in our homes. We need good leadership in the civic institutions of society. I think leadership is an indispensable ingredient for the success of any entity, whether it be the home, whether it be the school, whether it be the nation. And more people learn to be leaders, I think the more solution-oriented people we will have on the different levels of society.
Let me just, before I go over to Dion, I just wanted to engage you one more minute, as Mitchell,
Sure.
on this whole question of voting, because I've heard there's been a lot of discussion of the whole question of the overseas persons voting, and
Right.
there have been many suggestions about solutions to that problem, because there is a problem. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but there is a problem. Because if the law says one thing and something else is done, you're breaking the law.
Right.
If the law says, determines what residence is, and Dion George has clarified that for many occasions, what constitutes residence. And if you cannot satisfy residents, then you should not be able to vote there. That's what it's not that we don't want people to vote, but that's what the law says. I mean, if
Oh
you,
yeah, I'm all for obeying the law. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm all
well,
for
this is
obeying
the
the law.
point. Now, here's the other issue. If we say, okay, yeah, I'm sure everybody should be able to vote. Every Dominican should be able to vote wherever they are in the world. That would be great. But I mean, there has to be a law which governs how they vote and when they can vote and under what conditions they can vote. And second, let me just ask you this. I'm not so sure how many economic citizens we have now. It might be 20,000, we don't know. So what if all these people were allowed to vote? 20,000, we have what? About maybe 50,000, 40,000 something eligible voters in the registered voters.
Right.
If you have 20,000 people outside, most of them have never set foot on Dominica.
Right.
I mean, is it conceivable that we could just allow them to vote and stay away and just vote? All those things I think will be well thought of when we talk about Dominicans overseas, because these people who hold these passports are Dominicans.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure there's any differentiation in the law with them versus natural born Dominicans or naturalized Dominicans. I'm not sure there's any difference. Maybe Dr. Andre can help us with that. But I mean, certainly, these things to me need to be well thought of. And if we're going to make some amendments or electoral laws, we need to think about those things. Somebody, for one or two people, came up with a suggestion that what could happen is that you could allow the overseas constituent, all the overseas, to vote for one representative. So that would represent the diaspora voters. That might create more fairness. So you might have 3 or 4 people contesting an election for the diaspora vote, and one of them gets the majority, and then that one person elects the represent diaspora in the parliament. That is another way of, this is just another suggestion, right? I want to know your thoughts on some of those things, because we have no idea. I mean, I don't know whether you have any idea how many economic citizens we have. I don't. And it could be thousands, many
Yeah.
thousands.
I agree with what you're saying. I think we have to go by the present laws that we have. If they're Dominican citizens, then they should be afforded all of the privilege and the rights of the citizens. And so if we think there is a problem, then the law would have to be changed. I cherish the fact that as an American citizen, I am able to vote here in the United States. So if we think that poses an unfair situation, then the laws would have to be changed to reflect that. Obviously, if they are Dominican citizens, I'm repeating myself, then they would also have to function under the prevailing laws of the country.
Yes, and thank you for that. And Dion, let's just go over to you, because I know you want to contribute to this. That's part of the discussion now.
Yes, absolutely. And again, I always see areas where we can have diverse views and areas of confluence as well. In agreeing with Dr. Mitchell, when he mentioned earlier that Jesus Christ was not very likable, I think that's how it was phrased. That's true. But does that mean he wasn't a good leader? I think he was the greatest leader ever. In Dominica's context, I can tell you, Eugenia Charles. Some people that voted freedom had loved her, but I know some people that see Eugenia Charles as a nemesis. But I would categorically say she was an iron lady. She was a good leader, right? And so when we speak about likable and not likable, and oh boy, this guy is a handsome guy, and you're going to vote for somebody based on this very trivial thing, absolutely not. And I think we have exhausted that topic. But I mean, we all can call characteristics and features of good leaders. You know, you have to be tenacious, you have to be resourceful, you have to be analytical, adaptable. We all can have a litany of words that would describe a good leader. But I also think as well, religion plays a role in our politics in Dominica. People have gratitude, which is not a bad thing. I mean, if somebody gives you something, it's good to say thank you, and it's good to appreciate it. But sometimes we feel indebted. Sometimes someone gives you something and you feel, boy, I really don't support that policy, but you feel like you have to support the person because of what they did for you, even if they did something or that you do not agree with. And you know, so the whole idea of education, I think, matters. I've always been one who advocate for education. So I want to support both Mr. Thomas and Dr. Mitchell on the idea of the youth. Mr. Gregoire, if ever you have a program with young people and you want me to contribute or be part of it, on civic, on democracy, on development, on theories of political theories, I would love to be part of that. Because I think, of course, we want to create those leaders who can think critically and to make decisions that would make our country a better country. I liked something that Mr. Thomas said when he described the words of, by the way, one of my heroes, Sir Eric Williams, when he described the whole idea of democracy meaning being able to help someone else. And that is really true because in political science, there's a word for it. It's called performance democracy. And that came about 495 BC by one of the Athenians philosopher. And in that view is that democracy should be equal and the laws should benefit everybody. But in contemporary times, in current times, this view of a performance democracy comes in the context of what is the crime rate, what is the life expectancy, what is the poverty rate. And so if we are talking about a better Dominica as we venture towards our 50th year of independence, these are the conversations that need to be had. On a comparative basis, what is Dominica's poverty rate compared to other Caribbean islands within the region? What is our unemployment rate? What is our life expectancy? And these are some of the things that democracy also entails. It's really performance democracy. I will, at this point, respectfully disagree with Dr. Mitchell on the idea of overseas persons voting. I think, Mr. Gregoire, you touched on it, because you are right. I mean, in the Registration of Elections Act, Section 34567 speaks very clearly about the laws that already exist in Dominica. And it spells out verbatim the residency factor. But yes, I, just like the good pastor, had a view that I have persons in Dominica that I help. I send finances Dominica. And of course, I have an interest in Dominica. I go almost every 2 years and thereabout. But when I really think of it, I have come to realize that it's unfair. It's unfair to the Dominicans who are living there and someone who is overseas over the 5 year spans. And so the law right now says 5 years. Although, by the way, I have a problem with that because we can talk about that later. But okay, so that's the residency factor. I think it's utterly unfair to have someone living in the United Kingdom and the United States come down, vote, and leave, right? And I think it's unfair because it's the people on the island who has to deal with that government, whichever government it is. And so in all fairness, I would love to vote in Dominica, but when I vote in Dominica, and then I vote in the United States, what am I leaving the people in Dominica with? So forget my opinion and forget someone else's opinion. Let's deal with the law. Let's deal with what the Constitution says, and let's establish. And so, in other words, it's not that there is void of law, it's just that the law is not being obeyed. It's being disrespected. People are coming in and vote haywire, and it's not being obeyed. Yeah, and so I think I just wanted to mention that. But also, I would say education. This kind of conversation that we're having, it's a healthy conversation. I think it's healthy to agree on some points. I think it's also healthy to respectfully disagree and discuss why it is. Because I really do believe ultimately we want the best for our country. We want to create an institution that will function, that would not be taken advantage of, and that would be a good institutionalized process that we can feel proud about to be Dominicans. Thank you, Mr. Gregoire.
Yes, I know that that Pastor you would like to come to say, but I want to go over first to I'll come back to you, Nomi. I want to go to Dr. Andre because I feel that we need some input from Dr. Andre from all what has been said by yourself, by Alvin, by Dr. George, not only about the notion of leadership, but really the reality of what is on the ground. We all grew up a number of years ago, most of us here. I mean, Lambi's a young fellow compared to us. But the point is that you know what you mentioned there, Dr. Mitchell, you mentioned it with civics and civic education. We had that when we were in school. I don't know whether that is what created out the mindset that we had. Alvin talked about in his young revolutionary days, he was very involved in all kind of debating societies and all this and that. We all were so involved. Our parents always told us, go on a little trade after school. You know, you ought to be involved in something. You're in a football club, a cricket club, or something. Maybe this is what is lacking. They remove civic education from the curriculum, and maybe they should return it back there to create the mindset. Yeah. So, Alvin, I'll let you comment on that after I come from with Dr. Andre. Dr. Andre, let me go to you. We'll come back to Alvin.
All right, thank you, Mr. G. And once again, I thank all the participants for their wonderful comments. Now, Dr. Mitchell said that I misconstrued what he said. And he said, in fact, what he said is that, quote, just saying what problems are will not lead to solutions. Let me indicate here, with the greatest of respect, that intentionally or otherwise, and I would like to assume it's otherwise, Dr. Mitchell has trivialized the efforts made by concerned citizens in Dominica to usher in free and fair election. I have made reference to the efforts of people like Pastor Rodney. I have made reference to the studies as to what true electoral reform. So while blaming those who are advocating for free and fair elections, you are giving the political directorate a pass. That's what you're doing, because they are the ones who've been resistant to meaningful change, to have honest elections in Dominica. They have jettisoned all reports because they are in search of a particular type of report which will ensure perpetual electoral victory. Dr. Mitchell said, leaders see the problems and come up with solutions. Well, honest sir, you must be myopic, because over the years, there's been a number of suggestions with respect to true electoral reform, which are solutions, and you cannot trivialize those efforts. The real problem, Dr. Mitchell, and I hope you remove the obstacles which may prevent you from seeing that, is the fact that the political directorate is fundamentally opposed to free and fair elections. Therein, sir, lies the problem. Not the failure to come up with solutions. On the contrary, solutions have been proposed. But the electorate the political directorate made it clear that they are not proposed. What they want to do with the proposed amended legislation is to have their folks cherry pick who in the diaspora they will select to vote. That's the type of amendments, that's the type of reforms that they're seeking, Dr. Mitchell. In my respectful view, and I say so with the greatest of respect, if you don't recognize this, then quite frankly, again, I say so with the greatest of respect, and perhaps you're doing so inadvertently, but you're doing a disservice to the efforts made by honest to goodness citizens to usher an era where Dominica has free elections. Thank you.
Alvin, I'm going to come to you, but I just want to add to that, Dr. Mitchell, and I will allow you to respond as soon as Alvin goes. Because, I mean, let us not forget, that there have been many recommendations made by reputable organizations about electoral reform in Dominica. We know CARICOM, we know the OAS, there's several of them have been made, right? The question is why I heard our Attorney General say once that some government did accept something because it was too expensive or too cumbersome or something. But the fact of the matter is, when you come down to it, Jamaica has done it. Antigua did it. Antigua did it in 3 or 4 months, I think, Dr. Andre, I think Antigua did theirs in over a period of about 3 or 4 months, or Justin Simon.
That's right.
Yeah, he was the AG at the time, I think, or minister something, but they did that over 3 months. Now we have an expert there who has done it in Antigua. We have all the laws that already exist in Jamaica, the reformed laws and the regulations, they're there. It's not like rocket science, and we can see them there, they're right there, and we can see the results, they're working in those countries. So when I come back to you, Dr. Mitchell, you might want to just maybe take another look at some of those, and maybe you might want to respond to some of the comments made by Dr. Andre. So Alvin, let me go to you quickly.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. G. I guess for the benefit of our listeners and even ourselves on this panel, as I said earlier, we have to have this discussion within a certain context. We have to look at what is the elephant in the room. And yes, the elephant is in the room, and I agree we can't eat the entire elephant. We got to take it one part at a time. But what is the big elephant in the room? And let me say though that we will all agree there that election have consequences. Election has consequences, good or bad. Let's never forget that. And gentlemen, I always try in my contribution reference folks who have looked at some of those issues in a much more deeper way than even myself, some of us here. And not that they're always correct, but there is a certain context within which those issues are presented. Earlier on, Mr. G raised the question of campaign financing that he don't believe it was part of the terms of reference of Sir Byron. And so, let me, for the benefit of the listeners and tonight, state there that the report that was issued by the OAS, the primary OAS report on electoral reforms in 2019, and I'll quote on the campaign financing. That's reported. Considering the introduction of legislation to regulate political parties and campaign financing, including clear limits on campaign spending, the identification of the sources of funding, the prevention of anonymous donations, the limitation of private and in-kind donation to political and electoral campaign. In this regard, the OAS model legislation, so the OAS India got a model legislation on campaign financing may provide a useful point of departure. So clearly, gentlemen, clearly it's a question whereby the government in office do not see the need for genuine electoral reform. And until such time we can zero in on that, we're going to be in a fundamental problem. Because it's not just a question of you saying casting a vote. And I heard Dr. Mitchell said, well, oh, it's a small island, so somebody can anywhere in Dominica can go represent somebody. Let's understand what is democracy. When we speak of democracy, and we're talking about representation, I representing the village or the community or the constituency, don't you think it would have been a much more ideal situation that somebody from the constituency is made up of several villages, not just one village. The Roseau North constituency is made of Gotcha, Goodwill, Pottersville, Tarish Pit, you name it. Don't you think it would be more sensible than you take somebody from Grand Bay to go to Roseau North to represent the Roseau North people? And these are the key issues that we have to address. Again, going back to Kofi Annan in his report, in a Global Commission report on elections, democracy, and security. That's the title of the report. Deepening Democracy, a strategy for improving the integrity of elections worldwide. So again, gentlemen, it's not just a matter of affecting, it's worldwide. The spread of democracy across the world has been one of the most, I've seen one of the most dramatic changes I've witnessed over the course of my career. That is Kofi Annan saying that in country after country, people have risked their lives to call for the free election, democratic accountability, the rule of law, and respect for human rights. Across the world, uncontrolled political finance threatens to hollow out democracy and rob it of its unique strength. I'm saying this to say, guys, that until we can zero in and we talk about civic, it's not a question of civic. You know what the problem is? Every institution we know that functioned, even in my time, has been dismantled. Dismantled. The political arms have gotten in every institutions. The church, the business sector, the youth. You don't have those institutions anymore. And that's why I'm saying I'm calling on young people, and I always throw a current call to the business sectors as well, to stand up, to speak out. Because right now, I mean, those of us who as young as I am, like Dr. G, will remember the number of youth groups and clubs we had, debating society. I benefit so much from the GSC's movement. You had all these organizations. Don't talk about the church groups. How many organizations in various church groups? So it's not just a question of civics. Yes, that's just a minute aspect of the bigger picture, civics in school. But what about the institutions that have been dismantled over the years, including the judiciary? Look what happened recently with treating and bribing. A major and important legal matter like that was within the court system for so many years, that went to the court and then went to the OCS Court of Appeal, and the ruling on that particular matter. And guess what? A public prosecutor felt in her deliberate legal judgment, she nully what? Sheridan? Help her legal mind. She nully she show it out there to use by local palace. She said there's no merit to move forward with that case. Treating and bribing takes us right back to the question of campaign financing. Takes us right back to that issue. So clearly we can sit here and say, let's have civics in the school, but that is easier said than done. 2 weeks ago, not 2 weeks, a day or two ago, you had a situation with a quote-unquote supporter of the Labour Party that was going through some challenges at the hospital. A supporter of the party. That became a topical and discussion issue on the radio. And you had strong enablers of the Labour Party calling in to defend or try to indicate, well, that is not the case or whatever. Lo and behold, the wife of the prime minister intervened. And it's alleged that through her intervention, that the situation got fixed or corrected. And here they are congratulating and praising and thanking the wife of the prime minister. In a democracy. So is it now that you got to have that personal line as a citizens of Dominica to get some medical assistance or treatment? I'm saying, guys, we have to put this thing within context, and it is a much bigger. It's not just this question of teaching civics in school. Yes, I'm not dismissing it. Don't get me wrong, but I think we have to, as they would say, we have to walk and chew gum at the same time. We got to walk and chew gum. The situation in Dominica is critical enough. Although one might say, I'm in the US and I don't vote down there, but I think as Dominicans, wherever you are, you have an obligation to speak, at least to speak and agitate and to call and to ensure some change takes place in our country. And I believe electoral reform and the whole question of money and politics is a major issue that has to be addressed.
Yeah, I'm going to go over to Pastor Mitchell. But two things I just want to say to alert Lambi, that, Lambi, we haven't taken any calls from the public. And I know there's people who want to call. And so I'm going to go to Pastor Mitchell. And then once I'm done with him, I'll go over to you and you will give the people the numbers and we'll take a few calls because we really owe it to them to take some of the calls. But Pastor Mitchell, as I come to you, just one thing that that was mentioned about the whole question of selecting the candidates. And I think you did say there is nothing wrong if somebody coming from another part of the country and, and coming in to be a candidate in another constituency. But one of the things I seem to recall, though, is that I'm not so sure, I don't have the exact details of the Labour Party's constitution, but I know most political parties' constitution require that the candidates from the constituencies are selected by the delegates from those constituencies. What happens normally, we can check that. What happens normally is that these delegates, they come to the delegates conference, having selected their candidates at that level. They have the local election primaries and so on. They might have 3 candidates, they select one, and they come to a meeting of the party and say a national, delegates conference and say, this is our candidate. But sometimes I don't get the impression that that is what is happening now. I get the impression that people are being told, this is your candidate. And I was wondering about that, whether in fact the constitution of those political parties are being respected in terms of selection of the candidates. I'll go over to you now, Pastor Mitchell.
Yeah, I was just echoing what somebody else said. Somebody said on the panel that it was not against the law. Yeah. And I'm saying if it's not against the law, then it can be done because it's not against the law. Somebody said that, and I echoed what they said. I wasn't stating something as per my desire or my wish. I was just echoing what somebody said, and I can't remember who it was, but somebody on this panel tonight said that it would be unfair for someone to leave, for example, St. Joseph and go into Grand Bay to vote, but that there was nothing against the law if someone from St. Joseph chose to be placed up for elections. And I was just supporting that view, thinking that if I'm a Dominican, then why, if I wanted to represent the people in Grand Fall and they wanted me as the candidate, they couldn't vote for me. But that's not something that I'm terribly emotionally invested in. And I think a lot of the things that I'm saying are being misconstrued by people. here on the panel, but that's fine. I think if we come to the table with our preconceived notions about things, then even facts can be twisted to make our point. When I talked about voting in Dominique, I'd love to be able to vote in Dominique. I'm a Dominican, but if the law says that I can't, then I won't, and I haven't. So again, I'm not that emotionally invested in it. If I were, I would have found a way, because I go there 3 times a year, and I suspect the little that I know about the law, that I may have been able to cast a vote, since I have not stayed out for 5 consecutive years without coming out there. But I'm just saying, I would love to be able to vote as a Dominican, and to somehow progress in our discussions. I'm saying, why not let's think about another way to solve the problem, which is to allow the political parties to go ahead and contest the elections among Dominicans in America and in parts in Europe and all of those things. I'm just suggesting those things. I'm not even saying that, well, that's what I'd like for them to do, so that we can have a little progress in our discussions and not camped down just talking about what the problem is. But now let's discuss solutions. And yes, I don't think civics is a little thing. Again, you talk about trivializing, that to me is trivializing the conversation, to think that civics is a little thing. A child learns more in the first 5 years of their life than they will learn for the rest of their lives. And that is absolutely a fact. So to talk about teaching civics when children are young and their brains are pliable and they can receive and they can learn, to me, to see that as something very trivial in my mind is wrong. And there was something else that was said that I needed to. I've got so many things I want to respond to. But I'm not denying that some of the things that are being said are in fact true. What I'm saying is, what are some of the solutions? And yeah, this is what I wanted to respond to. I am not, again, trivializing the response of concerned citizens or any of those people. I mean, that would be so unfair of me to try to that's where I would like to deal. I like to deal in the arena of ideas and of solutions. So please, if somehow through my communication that was understood, I want to say I'm sorry, because it is never, ever my intention to trivialize anybody's contribution to solve what they perceive to be a problem in their country. That's totally not my intention. And I don't think that I talked about the fact of the problem. I talked about likability, but I never talked about what other people are presenting as possible solutions to the problem. I never trivialized anybody's view. I never did that.
Yeah, well, and thanks a lot for that, Pastor Mitchell. Lambi, I have to go over to you now. I'm sure that you have some calls. Like, you give the folks the numbers and just ensure that we can hear them when they call. Over to you, Lambi. We're not hearing you, Lambi. Your audio is very low. We're not hearing you. I don't know whether Chauvin can help you. If we're not going to hear you, then we'll have to move on, because we're not hearing you at all. So if Chauvin can maybe help you to solve that little technical glitch. So what I will,
Mr. G, let me just briefly, I very, very brief, I won't be long. Just to clarify with
we'll come back to you. Let's sort that problem out. We'll come back to you shortly, Lambi.
Pastor Mitchell.
Yeah.
I didn't in any way trivialize civic. I didn't even use that term, trivialize. What I was saying is that it's not just a question of civic. And I think I ended by saying, yes, I think civic is important, but it's a bigger picture than that. The fact remains that institutions in Dominica has been dismantled over the years. I worked in the public service, and I was general secretary of the PSU for a number of years. I was involved in credit union and a number of organizations in Dominica. And Sheridan will attest to that, and folks who are listening to me will attest to that, that institutions now are highly politicized. People are scared to talk. People are fearful. Can't say anything. The police force is so politicized everywhere. And we've had governments before. You had Freedom Party, you had UWP, even the previous Labour Party. We've never had it as we have it today. And that's the point I'm making. Once institutions in a democracy, the private sector institution, religious institution, community-based institutions, once this institution begins to disintegrate and politics start, political parties start mashing them up, to use the local parlance, then we have a big problem. We have a major problem on our hands.
Well, I agree with you.
That's
I
the
mean,
point I was trying to make.
I agree with that. If institutions are, begins to disintegrate, but what I'm saying is one thing don't have to be sacrificed for another thing to be true. It is also true that we need certain foundational elements to be built into the fabric of our souls as we grow as a nation and as we grow as a people. And if you were to diagnose those situations, it might very well be that that's happening because of the lack of those kinds of instructions in our formative years.
Yes, and thanks a lot for that response, Pastor Mitchell. But I know that Dr. Andre, you might want to help us with some of this the notion, institutions, because we're still talking about democracy, because really what we want to have a more perfect situation in America, where there's an even playing field and we can, people can have their way when they want to go to the polls and to vote and so on. But democracy relies to a large extent on the strength of many of its institutions, as we know. If for example, the three tiers of government are not working well, where you have now, for example, that the cabinet determines what happens in the parliament. So although you're supposed to have these checks and balances, you have a cabinet, you have a parliament, you have the judiciary, but at the same time, the cabinet takes a decision and they have the majority in parliament. So whatever they decide in cabinet goes because they have a majority in parliament. And then the fact that our political directorate have a say in appointing judges. Now we know the case of Brian Alley now. If the political directorate can appoint judges, I mean, that is a problem. We need to find a solution to that problem. When a prime minister is able, and he has the power to do it, it seems under the constitution, is able to take a minister from his cabinet and make him the president, I think that is a little problematic because it's obvious that person will have come with a political, some kind of political thing, all right? They're not going to be apolitical, coming straight from the cabinet, straight into, as a minister going straight into presidency. But then,
That was the first, no precedent.
no, there's no precedent for that. I mean, this is the point. But the thing is, maybe the Constitution allows it. I mean, that's the kind of thing. So somebody's taking advantage of that loophole. Now, Dr. Andrew, we know of many other institutions, important institutions that have suddenly gone very quiet. I mean, we see what's happening with the Electoral Commission. We see what's happening with the IPO and some of these other institutions. Maybe you can help us with some of those.
Well, again, let me commend my fellow panelists for the sterling contribution they've made thus far. It's wonderful, even if I take issue with some of the utterances of some of our panelists. There is an 800-pound gorilla in the room. And that gorilla is not the absence of solutions proposed by those who advocate for free and fair elections, those who advocate for good governance. The 800-pound gorilla in the room is the systematic evisceration of the institutions of good governance. Mr. G, you've made reference to the IP. Mr. G, ask yourself what happened to the traditionally constituted village town council. What happened, for example, to the whole question of the Electoral Commission? Tell us what has happened to those electoral laws. Tell us whether judges have the independence to make decisions. Indeed, in one notorious case some time ago, the Attorney General recommended that a sitting Dominican judge not sit on a case. There are magistrates who are being held on contracts so that they will toe the line. Talk to us about these things, because they go to the heart of the problem. Not an absence of solutions, but a systematic attempt to destroy the institutions of good governance in Dominica. That is the problem. And to the extent that we don't recognize, this is not an opinion. This is a fact. This is a fact. And to the extent you don't recognize that, then again, the fundamental question is raised. Are we part of the problem or are we part of the solution? Thank you.
Yes, and I'm sure, Dion, that you might, Lambi, I don't know whether you've solved the little technical glitch that you have. So until Sherwin can help you, I don't know whether you ask Sherwin to please assist you with that so you can solve that. We need to take the calls from the callers. I want to go over to Dion. Dion, I know you want to add to some of that because we've done quite a bit of work in some of the programs that we've had. The whole question of electoral reform, the whole question of campaign finance reform, the whole question of the breakdown of certain institutions, which are some of the really the bedrock of democracy. I mean, if some of the institutions are not functioning, if the Electoral Commission, for example, is not, I personally do not agree with the composition of the Electoral Commission as it is now. It has been that way for quite a while. But the point is, when you have the opposition party nominating two people, the governing party in power nominates two, and then the prime minister and then the president nominates one on the advice of the prime minister with the approval of the prime minister or something, it says clearly that the decision is going to get skewed in one way or the other. I frankly believe that we should have a lot more representation from civil society. Like the attorneys and all the civic groups that we're talking about, the church groups and so on. To me, these major institutions should have a say on that board. So the public, civil society should have greater representation. I don't think it should be just the politicians having a say in what happens in our elections. So that's one of my views. Now, Dr. George, maybe you might want to help us with some of those and any other issues you have on your mind.
Okay, good. Thank you so much. Again, just like Dr. Andre, I really want to commend my other panelists for the strong points that they are making. These conversations need to be had because it matters for Dominica. It matters for Dominica going forward. And of course, where we can recognize loopholes or concerns, and if we can suggest ways in which they can be fixed, I think that's healthy. For example, one of the things I like about the United States is the way the government is structured. Now, that is the difference between what is called a presidential democracy versus a parliamentarian democracy. And so it was James Madison, one of the architects of the American system, that had all these checks and balances, which we are lacking some of that in Dominica. For example, the executive, the president, he can be weakened by the legislature by means of a veto. He can weaken, the legislature by the means of a veto. So if the Congress passes a law and the president can veto it, and it has to take 2/3 of the Congress to overthrow their veto. What it means, the president alone cannot just veto it, but Congress alone cannot do whatever it wants. But even the legislature itself is checked by the judiciary when it comes to having judicial review. And so Congress can pass a law, but the courts can say, no, it's unconstitutional. And so it's a really good check and balances that the US have established. Of course, the US is a more mature democracy, over 200 years of governance and so forth. We are just only 50 years. And so, of course, we have growing pains. And so I'm not blaming particular individuals. The time will come when institutions will operationalize, right? And so that's what we are doing. We're talking about what needs to fix. And so these things need to fix, right? The other thing I would like to talk about electoral campaign finance reform, I did have an opportunity to meet with the business forum and had a chance to do a 15-minute presentation with Sir Dennis Byron. And you are quite correct. A lot of the recommendations that were submitted to him by members of different sectors, one of the things that he responded, I recall clearly, he says he will consider all the recommendations, but something to do with campaign finance reform. I recall he mentioned something to the effect that, well, tell him exactly what needs to be done, and then he can consider it. But I think he was saying something like he haven't seen a clear roadmap, clear blueprint of what campaign finance reform is. But he said if he gets one, he will consider it. And so I look very much forward to having his recommendations come through for Dominica. But I mean, Mr. Gregoire, we have exhausted this discussion on campaign finance reform. We have exhausted the discussion on cleaning the voters' ID, the voters' list, the whole issue of residency, the whole issue of persons in the diaspora coming and vote, and so, I mean, we're just hoping that the government does what it has to do, which is to implement those recommendations. That's it. Yes.
Alvin, I think you wanted to add something to that.
Yeah. Let me just maybe expand a little further or from your Dion left. I don't think by simply hoping that government will, because they will not. Unfortunately, they will not. Like in Antigua, Antiguans went to the street and demanded that they get electoral reform. They went to the street and protested and demanded they get electoral reform. There's one guy, I think he has family ties to Dominica, who I recall was on cue talking about the whole way they went about it from Antigua. So if we sit here and say, well, hope government, this administration, it's not going to happen. Because we've seen we had 3 reports. We had a report in 2014, we had a report in 2019, we had the OECS CARICOM Commonwealth Secretariat report, and nothing has happened. Let me just share with you some other information. The document I referred to by Giles, by Cynthia Barrow Giles, conceptualizing the Caribbean, status of regulatory regime in the Commonwealth Caribbean up to 2012. 2012, that was just maybe 9 years ago. Countries, disclosure by party, by candidate, contribution limit, spending limit. Antigua Barbuda, disclosure, yes. By party, no. By candidate, yes. Contribution limits, no. Spending limits, no. That was 9 years ago. This situation had even maybe further improved. But 9 years ago, you had disclosures in Antigua. You had by candidate and disclosure. Barbados, where earlier on Irving made the reference that Mia Motley did a report on that. Barbados, by disclosure, yes. By party, no. By candidate, yes. Contribution limit, no. Spending limit, yes. That's Barbados. Guyana, disclosure, yes. By party, no. By candidate, yes. Contribution limit, yes. Spending limit, yes. Jamaica, disclosure, yes. By party, no. Candidate, yes. Contribution limit, no. Spending limit, yes. So here we are. There's several other countries there on the list. Some has no. Antigua, incidentally, Antigua became independent in 1981. They're 40 years of independence. We're 1978. We're 3 years older than them. But 9 years ago in 2012, they had disclosure, yes. By candidate, yes. Dominica, by disclosure, no. By party, no. By candidate, no. Contribution limit, no. Spending limit, no. No throughout. That's the point I'm making, guys. there is this elephant in the room. And until such time we can agitate, for want of a better word, then we're going to be constantly having those discussions. And I don't, and while it's true, Dion, that we have spoken of that ad nauseam and over, we cannot stop talking. We gotta keep talking and raising the issue as long as we have breath. I always like to refer back to my roots, JCIs. Service to humanity is the best work of life. That's one of our tenets. This is your legacy you have to leave. This is your legacy. When your maker takes you to the beyond, what legacy did you leave for humanity? I'm not talking about the money in the bank or the 6 houses or the yacht and all that stuff. What legacy, what have you done to change and impact humanity and the lives of people? What have you done? What did you do? And that is a fundamental question we have to ask ourselves. So we have to keep talking, but we have to also agitate for action and protest. Because what is happening is unacceptable. I don't care what side of the fence you are, it is unacceptable. And there are several other issues I can point tonight. But the point remains, until such time, who pays the piper calls the tune. The money is what is corrupting the process, and the process is corrupted in all shapes and forms. And we have to get people to rise up to the situation.
Yes, and I wanted to before Lambi, I don't know whether you're ready to. I don't know whether you solved the problem now. Can we hear you now, Lambi? Well, you want to go ahead and give the numbers? Let's hear you.
Yes, the numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624, and we are taking your calls. If you do not do that now, we're standing by for your calls.
All right, so I wanted to go to, and while we're waiting for the call, just interrupt us anytime, Lambi, once the calls start coming in. They've started coming in. Now let's go then. Let's take the calls.
Okay, the caller, please go ahead with your call.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Gentlemen, I'm listening to the program. It's a very good program, knowing that the people on the program are very high-powered in the information that they're delivering. I listened to the issue with the 24,000 citizens by investment outside of Dominica, and I see it is very difficult locally for Dominica with Dominicans to win an election, because an election is won by one vote. And if we have 24,000 people out there with a voting intention to the government that they deals with, then the opposition have no chances. So on this, I would like you guys to do the best you can in terms of educating the people and getting some positive information on that. The next issue is my pal rep in the Roseau North constituency is a man elected by the people according to the Constitution, that the Constitution would make allowance to pay a salary to this individual, since their business is to mind the business of the thousands of people in the constituency. Now, there's an issue about the House of Assembly that created the government to take a stand. The government have the eyes. The eyes have it, the majority is theirs. And whatever they wish to do to the opposition, even if the law doesn't constitute it, they will do it and say the eyes have it. Gentlemen, I know you have lawyers, we have judges, we have good educated political doctors on this program. I would like you all to educate us on those things, because our pal rep is out of a salary, which means that we doesn't have any representation in the community of Roseau North. Thank you and good night.
Yes, and thank you for that, Lambi. You got another call? All right. While you're waiting for the calls, Lambi, let us have a little discussion further. Because Dr. Andre, I mean, you want to take a call now? Let's take it then.
On the international line, please go ahead with your call.
Good evening, Lambi. Good evening, Mr. G. Thank you guys for taking my call this evening. I'm listening to the program, and it's a good, interesting program. I had asked the Attorney General a question on DBS Talking Point program, and he said, you know where I'm going with that, so he don't want to touch that. Something to that nature. I can't remember exactly his answer. First thing first, with electoral reform, for so long we've been hearing about local government reform. This not happening, so we need to start there too. But I know we don't have the time to go into this. My recommendation is here. Well, my observation is this. It makes absolutely no sense to me, according to the laws of Dominica, where if you, once your name, that's what it says, once your name is on the list and you've come to vote. Now, we know of, and I can testify too, that one of the times I came to Dominica around the last election, there were people that flew with me from St. Martin to Dominica, and there were 24 of us on the plane, and 19 of those persons were going to the Lapland constituency. They bragged it to me because I pretend to be a supporter of the party they were supporting, and they went to vote. I can testify to that. Now, these people, upon arrival, what I did cleverly, observed their passports, and some had U.S. passports, and one had a Canadian passport. Now, these people are able to vote, right? Now, what is stupid about the law is this. A citizen, someone who is citizen of a different country, as long as their name is on the list, they can vote. But that individual, however, cannot be a member of parliament. So these are the things we need to look at. It makes absolutely no sense. Someone go to Dominica, whether they are a European citizen or whatever citizenship that they have, and those person, that individual, can vote a government on the people. And after election, they can leave and go back to wherever they go. Like right now, a lot of the people in the U.S. are enjoying stimulus package. They vote the government on the people. The people in Dominica are not getting no stimulus package, but they're enjoying the stimulus package elsewhere. And they are not there to feel the pain and the ache and the itch with what's going there. But someone who is going to be part of government to help solve the problem cannot vote. I think this is the discussion we need to have. We need to look at the laws itself, what recommendations need to be made, and what are the adjustments that you need to make to do that. As a matter of fact, and I'm trying to confirm that, it has been brought to my attention several times. There are about 2 individuals who are currently members of parliament who could be U.S. citizens as we speak in the current parliament of Dominica. So we need to look at, examine these things. How do we address that? And for what I'm hearing, it is almost impossible to win a case like if someone actually is a citizen of a different country and become a member of parliament. We see it happen here in Dominica a few times.
Thank
so
you,
we
caller.
need to look at the law. Okay?
Thank you, caller. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for that call. All right, so let's get going again, because I was going over to, was it to you, Dr. Andre?
I believe so, yes.
Yes, let's go to you, because there's so much to talk about. I mean, and I like the fact that Pastor Mitchell is talking solutions. You know, it is very important for us to look at solutions, but it seems as if solutions have been eluding us for a long time. I mean, for some reason, we have not been able to get those solutions, and we're talking about big obstacles in the road. Why, if we know all the other countries around us have done that, if we know that campaign finance reform is essential, why would we leave it out of the terms of reference of Sir Dennis Byron? The legal luminary, we're paying him so much money. Yeah. Maybe Dr. Andrew might have an answer to that question.
Because that tells you about the level of commitment to true campaign finance or electoral reform. It's very simple. There's nothing magic about this. It tells you the fundamental lack of commitment to genuine electoral reform. You have dumped 3 separate independent reports that speak to cleansing the voters list, campaign finance reform, ensuring or enforcing the eligibility requirements for voting. What have you done with them? You have thrown them by the wayside. Upavleyo. C'est pas ça vous voulez. What you want is for people to be able to be certain party functionaries to be cherry picking Dominicans in the diaspora to vote, thereby diluting the voters in Dominica itself and rendering the elections unfair. Now, let us compare what obtains now by way of reform and what Rosie Douglas proposed, because Rosie Douglas understood this problem. Rosie Douglas understood, and he said that repeatedly, that to allow Dominicans abroad to participate freely in Dominica's elections would render it fundamentally unfair because those votes will significantly exceed votes cast in Dominica. Now we're talking about solutions, but again, these folks are not really interested in solutions, Gasson. What did Rosie propose? He proposed that Dominicans in the diaspora can vote for 2 elected representatives who would sit in the House and agitate for the interests and the policies of Dominicans in diaspora. And the reason for that, so that at least the votes on the ground in Dominica would continue to have meaning. But the folks are not interested in that, Gasso. You're crazy? That would not achieve the desired result. It would not achieve electoral victory in perpetuity. We have to call a spade, you know. We can't play games with this thing, eh? This is the fundamental problem that we have. The commitment through electoral reform is virtually non-existent. And therein lies the danger that confronts Dominica today. It is not a matter of a lack of solutions. The solutions are there, staring us in the face. What is the problem is the lack of commitment to institute true reforms as have been instituted throughout Dominica. Now, the last caller made reference to the fact that there is a school of thought that as long as your name is on the voters list, you should be able to vote. That is a recipe for fraud. Because think of it objectively. Take that argument to its logical conclusion. If, hypothetically, once you are on the voters list, you should be able to vote. The question is simple. What is the incentive for cleaning up the voters list? Tell us. What is the incentive for cleaning up the voters list if your position is as long as someone's name is on the voters list, they should vote? I don't know if it's been taken. My name was on the list. I last voted in Dominica in the 70s. Why should I vote? Why should my vote has the same weight as a Dominican on the ground who has to contend with the policies of the government, who has to contend without a stimulus package, who has to contend with shortages, who has to contend with discriminatory sharing of what? Of help in the post-Maria period, in the post situation that we have, the COVID situation. These are the folks who have to contend with those deprivations, not me. So why should my vote count just as well or just to the same degree as those who have to deal with those types of issues? It is patently unfair. That is why when we talk about electoral reform, we're talking about the preservation of the very heart of Dominica's democracy. Thank you.
Yes, and thanks a lot, Dr. Andre. Lambi, let's take a call if you'd like a call or two before we move on.
Yeah, we had a call on there. Let's see if he's still there. Caller, are you still there?
Yes, Lambi.
Please.
Greetings, I'm still there.
Yeah, please go ahead and
Can you hear me?
what's your time? What's your timing? I hear you. Okay.
Okay, Lambi. I listen. Greetings, Mr. G, and to the panelists.
Yes.
Mr. G, you talk about electing, appointing the judges. To me, the problem is anybody could nominate a judge, but they should come before a panel or before the legislature to approve that nomination. So you will have more checks and balances. You understand? Another thing I want to say is that if we're talking about democracy, and we have a representative democracy in Dominica, and you talk about the stipulation in which the voters have to be registered to qualify to vote, and not the votee, or the person we voted for. But we have to stick to the principles of democracy. It has to be for the people, by the people, and of the people. So the person we're going to elect to represent us has to be somebody of the people in every aspect, in local government, in the different constituencies. It has to be of the people. And my last point, Lambi, is about the question of likability. And Dr. George is right. Religion have a lot to play with our politics. So if we have to be true to our religion, why you would like somebody that does cheat, or somebody that's dishonest, or somebody like to victimize? Why you would like that person to have them represent you? If we say we are a Christian nation, so that business of likability is really a red herring or a balanced way. That is just a distraction to distract people from the real issue, because the real issue is that we don't have an equal playing field. There's too much irregularities. When you have one person with $72 million to run a little campaign in Dominica of 65,000, and cheating and bringing up too much irregular, this has nothing to do with likability. That's just a balanced way, Mr. Andre. Thank you so much.
Well, that sounds like Bob Marley. And Bob Marley and Andre ganging up against me. I tell you already, I like my ballad for you. Give me a break. Well, I wanted to go over to Pastor Mitchell. Because I'm pretty sure that you have some other thoughts on some of those things you've been hearing. I mean, we dwell in a little bit on the question of the electoral reforms and campaign, but really and truly, I think the fundamental question that seems to be coming back at me all the time, it still goes back to leadership, because you see, you talk about leadership on solutions. And if the solutions are being presented to all leaders, why aren't they looking at them? Because I mean, there's a litany of reports. I mean, all of the groups in Dominica under NJAM are one of those groups. All of the civil society, all representatives were there. Even the church was there. I remember the Roman Catholic Church was there. Pastor Rodney was there. And all these people got together and they created a report, and they gave that report to Sir Dennis Byron. And we know that he has access to the OAS report and the CARICOM. I mean, it seems to me that should our leaders have required Sir Dennis Byron, or shouldn't they have just listened to the OAS and CARICOM and all those agents and look at all the reports coming from the people, and then also look at what has happened in some of our sister countries, what they have done, and how it has changed the situation on the ground, made the thing more fair and balanced. Okay, before I go over to you, let me take a little call. Let Lambi take a call, Pastor Mitchell. We'll come back to you in a minute. Let me go ahead.
Caller, please go ahead and be brief as possible. Overseas line, are you still there? No, the person's moved on.
Yeah, so let's go to Pastor Mitchell, because I have these questions in my mind, about leadership that want solutions. If those solutions are presenting themselves before you, why aren't we looking at them? Why is it taking? Sir Byron has been on this thing for a year. Antigua did theirs in 3 months. I don't know whether you have any thoughts on why that might be so in terms of a function of leadership.
I think if so many people are thinking the same thing in opposition to what they think is wrong, then why aren't they coming together and making a greater point out of it and influence and change? Why is that not happening? Could it be, and I'm asking a question here innocently, Could it be that there is not the right leadership leading in that department? Because if so many people are saying this is wrong, that is wrong, the other is wrong, and it is supposed to be so glaring to all, why isn't there a stronger movement in opposition to what people say is wrong? I demonstrated at the age of 17 with Charles Savre. We don't want no Patrick John. Patrick John is total, and you know what the word was that followed. But there was a leader that was able to rally, like him or don't like him, but he was able to rally the forces. So we might be talking about the wrong thing. Or we ourselves, as we accuse others of avoiding certain things, might be also avoiding something. Now, I like the suggestion that was made, and the good judge might be surprised. The idea that he talked about Rosie Douglas, I think that's a brilliant idea. I would love to be able to play a role in determining the direction of Dominica, my beloved country. But I would not play a role that is against the law. So I won't go there to vote because I'm a law-abiding citizen. And that's what I'm talking about, coming up with solutions. I don't want people to have a preconceived notion as to what my political ideology might be or might not be. You may be sadly mistaken. The fact is, I'm in search of solutions also. So what he talked about, Rosie, with having 2 or 3 representatives that the diaspora would vote for, I think that is a brilliant idea. And I would say it's a brilliant idea on any radio station, in any forum, because I am yet to meet the person that I can't tell what I'm thinking. I'm yet to meet that person. And I'm all for truth, and I'm all for justice. But could we also have a problem of leadership in opposition? I'm not saying that we do or we don't. I'm asking a question. Could we? I mean, think about it. How many demonstrations have been called in Dominica where 10 people go, 5 people go? When Mr. Savre was the leader of the General Secretary of the Civil Service Association, he called a meeting, the whole nation went. The voice you listen to will determine your future and will determine the next season of your life. The question is, do we have a strong enough voice that is able to command the attention and command the respect and command the support and the partnership? Any country does better when it has a strong opposition. Any government, the government itself, I mean, should admit that a strong opposition does good for a country. And again, bringing up this likability question, I think we've, the horse is dead, so let's dismount. I voted for Hillary Clinton, and it was said that Trump was a more likable candidate. So I mean, I'm not a kid, but I do understand that likability does play a role. And everybody on this panel has tonight accepted and agreed with me that likability plays a role. It may not be it is not the single most determining factor, but it does play a role. So let's get off that horse. The horse died, let's dismount and let's move on. But I like the solution about, hey, let's have 3 parliamentary representatives for the diaspora and let us vote.
Yes.
And the reason why we will make the right decisions is because those of us who are in North America and Europe and so on, we consider ourselves to be educated, and we won't solely make a decision based on likability. We will consider other things. So what is wrong with our population?
Yeah.
What is wrong with the Dominican population that somehow this panel is able to point on so many things that they think is wrong, but yet still the people don't see what they see? So, I mean, are we speaking to the people, or are we speaking past the people? And could it be that the politicians and the government understands something about the people that we don't understand? Hence, their views are more listened to, and they're more influential, which is what leadership is. Leadership is the pivot on which the mechanism of any institution swings. It's the ability to influence people. That's what leadership is. But so we can talk cows come home. Are we able to, or are we in fact influencing the people in our direction? Or are we talking past the people? Do we have effective leaders in the nation who is able to command the respect and to command the hearing of the people and to lead a movement against what you are saying is so wrong with the nation.
And let me ask you this though, as we go for Lambi, we're going to go over to Lambi 1 minute, but I wanted to ask you, in terms of leadership, one of the functions there could be that which leader has the money to sway, because money makes a big difference in influencing people in Dominica today.
I totally agree. They say money is the mother's milk of politics. Money is a major influencer in terms of elections.
I want to go to Lambia. When I come back, I want to ask you what your thoughts are on term limits. Because you see, this is one of the things that we've been talking about. I haven't heard your thought on that. You live in America. They do have term limits. Lambia, you still have a call?
Yeah, there are a couple of people trying to get in there. Let's see if they're still there. Caller, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Please go ahead.
I want to address Michel, and I heard him many times. Although he claims he comes to Dominica 3 times a year, from his views, that's my opinion, is clueless about the political landscape of Dominica. And to me, he's just faking it till he make it. When he talks about he owns property and he should be able to vote, there's laws, my man. I own commercial property in Roseau Central. I don't think that makes it right for me to come and vote. I really think you need to look at the political landscape and the laws before you give your views. That's only my opinion. I still feel, honestly, you're a little bit clueless on it, and you really need to educate yourself on Dominica politics before you really come and talk. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Lambi. Great show. I'm listening.
Can I respond to this? I never said. I said I would like to, but I never said. I've never been to Dominica to vote. I've never voted in Dominica. I never said that I want to go to. I said I would like to. I own property there and all of that. I was born in Dominica, but I'm a law-abiding citizen. So in spite of the fact that I could, based on the inconsistencies that you profess exist, but I've refused to do it because I'm a law-abiding citizen. So, Mr. Caller, get your facts right. Get your facts right. I never said that.
Thanks a lot. Lambi, you have another call, or you want us to move on?
We lost that one.
You lost that one.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to give out the numbers again, Lambi, so before we move on, so that you can maybe take 1 or 2?
Yeah, the numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. And we do have a call on the line. Caller, please go ahead.
Yes, good evening, Lambi, and how do you do?
I'm fine, and you? Go ahead.
Yes, and good evening to your panelists. Very interesting program. Lambi, I hope we're not making a mistake with respect to comparing today's politics with the politics of the 70s. Because when we talk about a mass protest, and I heard the gentleman talk about when Charles Savage called us and we were going to do that. Remember, the nurses, the policemen, they were under what they call the public service. So you had one thing. Today we have division. You have the police welfare. You have today now the Nurses Association and the Teachers Association. Before it was one thing. The union, they were fighting for a common cause. This is something different today. And I hope we are not actually saying that there are not leaders who are so enthusiastic, who are so, and I hope we're not talking about leaders who have to attract people to come to vote. The things that are happening to Dominicans today, there is no political party has to tell you to come out to fight for your rights. When the government wanted to cap your salary for 20 years, you need a political person to come and tell you to go out. When a government can watch people, after you are elected, you finding it necessary to select, to give back some people, whereas all of us paying taxes. Do you need a political leader or opposition leader to tell you to come and do that? Because, and it's something else, and I don't know if the gentleman is a real, that I have a feeling right now that the electoral office has abdicated its responsibility to an extent. Here it is that Mr. Byron, the government has contracted Mr. Byron to do something. But it It is the responsibility of the Electoral Commission to continue its work with respect to ensuring that the list is cleansed, the list that we're talking about, the general electoral list is cleansed, to know that we have ID cards. They should be pushing that agenda. We should not be waiting for Dennis Byron's report. And I don't think the gentleman is really understanding the political landscape today. We're talking about electoral reform, talking about how you use government resources to bribe the people, giving some, and if you're not red, you better off dead. And you're telling me it's poor leadership? Well, I will end there because the program is not mine. But I feel insulted as a Dominican, living in this country for some time now. And what I'm seeing to tell me that we lack leadership to bring people, the 70s is not 2000 and 2021. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Lambi, you want to take another one?
Yeah, we do have another call on the line. Caller, please go ahead.
Yeah. Do I want to be tear gassed when I go and demonstrate? No, not at all.
Thank you very much.
Well, yes. Let's roll on. I wanted to go over to you, Alvin, because one of the things that I think Pastor Mitchell may have mentioned about the opposition and the government, and I think any smart government would want to have an opposition, a strong opposition. That is part of the government. The opposition is an integral part of the government. Opposition is supposed to keep the government on its toes, and a smart government. But I don't know if you can recall, anybody here can recall that I think our Prime Minister did say that the opposition is a waste of time. You don't need the opposition. I don't know if any of us can recall that. I know if that is the case, I don't know whether you want to call that smart leadership, Pastor Mitchell, because it seems to me the opposition is a part of the government machinery. It's a part of the government machinery.
I agree.
And it helps the incumbent to have an opposition that's going to keep it on its toes.
Absolutely.
Yes. But even in terms of the consultations that are required, too often we're hearing that the law requires that the government should consult the opposition leader on certain things before certain appointments are made. We don't seem to be having that consultation, or there is a misinterpretation of what consultation means. Sometimes you get a feeling that people say, if I inform you, I've consulted you. And to me, that is probably not the best way to go. Now, let me go over to Alvin, because I know our time is running out, and I know you want to say a few things.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. G. Let me just again put some things in certain contexts, because I heard Dr. Michel said that during Charles Savre days, that he did this and he was able to call out and his leadership and all of that. Let me say, for the benefit of our listeners, I was involved during the Charles Savre era. Alvin Thomas. I left SMA in 74 and in 75 I was in public service, and in that same year I became a member of the CSA. And that very same year, 75, 76, I was elected on the executive of the union. This matter wasn't a Charles Savre matter. His name was out there. But as I will go back and say again, you had Charles Savre, Louis Benoit from Wawu, may his soul rest in peace. Anthony Frederick Joseph from the Dawu, may his soul rest in peace. You had a DAIC that was vibrant, a DF, and anything that we did had the support of the wider community. It goes back to institution. So while I agree, some aspect of leadership need, but is the society is been dismantled. When we did the 47-day strike, there were farmers coming to feed us, farmers providing food and supplies for us. The point remained, there was a collective influence of people. So we can't just minimize it to a Charles Savre and say, well, Charles Savre do that, so why now we don't have another Charles Savre? The churches were vocal in those days. We had the National Salvation, you know that, Mr. G. When we had the Patrick John 79 situation, that very night, you had a big meeting in Lagon with all the unions and private sector and you name it. And it's the next day within, and the rest is history, what happened with PJ 79. The point remains that this administration has systematically dismantled all these institutions. And that is what the whole question of democracy. It's no different when Hitler took over, when you had all these situations in Haiti, and Saddam Hussein and those people, the way in which they intimidate the citizenry. I mean, look at what happened in Parliament. The budget, the parliamentary budget before the last one, the leader of the opposition in some way effectively questioned the whole CBI program and pointed out where monies are not properly accounted for. The Prime Minister himself recognized and said that if the monies were put in the consolidated fund, there would have been a bigger fund. He then said that he will present the actual numbers a couple months after, up to today, jigsaw du jour, as we would say. This last budget, in order not to, or to prevent him from doing what he did in the previous budget, they systematically had the opposition not contribute to the debate. I was just browsing on my phone. I count 21 countries that in the CBI program, or citizen by investment, if you call it that. Dominica, Antigua, and St. Lucia, the only few out of the 21 that charge 100,000. Guess how much the United Kingdom? £2 million. And what's the requirement? Residency for 3+ years. Minimum real estate residency is the criteria. The United States of America, minimum 900,000 US residency plus green card for citizenship. Our citizen is well enshrined in our constitution. And look how we are, what term should I use? We're emasculating our citizenship and taking that same monies now and possibly using it to campaign and to finance. I mean, these are the issues. These are the fundamental issues. And you're right. Maybe the citizens are a bit numb. They've been beaten so much on their heads. They've been beaten so much for the last 20 years that they're numb. They are numb. But like I said, my hope is that young people, and that's why I have to shout out to Monsewie. They're a group of young men who have been going the length and breadth of the country and speaking to the issues and asking people to read their constitution, get a copy of the constitution. As I said earlier, election has consequences. On the question of the judges and the appointment of the judges, let's look at a situation in the US. Election has consequences. We saw what happened when the Republican and Trump was there and how he tried to put Supreme Court judges on the individuals on the Supreme Court, because these are permanent judges for life. Election has consequences. And that is why I live in Georgia. And that is why we went out door to door and did what needed in Georgia to ensure we elected 2 senators. Because that's what saved America. Had we not done that, the Senate would have been held by the Republicans. And that is what election has consequences. And that is why I'm hoping with the election in Grand Bay that a clear message will be sent. And I'm calling out to the people of Grand Bay now, if they're listening to me and they're hearing me, that election have consequences. And Grand Bay must be the constituency to change the trajectory of politics in Dominica. Grand Bayrians have been people who have stood up before. We know of the Geneva Revolution and all of that. Revolt. Grand Bay has it now. It's now. Grand Bay must show where and how this country. It's not even a good 2 weeks since Ed was put to rest. Ed Regis was an individual that contributed to his country selfishly. His mother spoke of the sacrifice that he made us. My son was a sacrifice. He's been involved in every aspect of development. The church, the youth, you name it. And you have a deputy leader of the party, that is so-called, and Ed was the general secretary of the party, a deputy leader of the party, a senior member of the cabinet, going into the village in Grand Bay and making so many disparaging comments about Ed, about the fact that monies were given to Grand Bay, you don't know where the money went and the private account and all this thing. The people are numb. I'm saying, wake up, Dominicans, wake up and agitate.
I don't know whether Pastor Mitchell want to say something here, or should I go over to?
Oh, I appreciate the discussion tonight. You know, I'm just wondering here if what I'm hearing is total capitulation here and total surrender. I mean, we can jump high, we can jump low. Leadership is the key. And
I'm in no way suggesting surrender.
You're in Georgia, but the name that stands out was the leader of that movement, Stacey Abrams. We cannot minimize, we cannot somehow do away with the fact that leadership is critical in leading any movement. Yeah, we have the battle cry. We have the wake up call. Everybody has talked tonight about what supposedly is the wake up call. But the fact is, who is going to lead? Who is going to lead? Dr. King, he led a movement. Gandhi led a movement. Martin Luther led a movement when he took the 95 Thesis and nailed it on the doors of the monastery in Germany, when he discovered the just shall live by faith. And we cannot deny the critical role that leadership plays in any movement. And so, you know, I'm not supposed to be advising you or advising anyone. I'm just saying that we can talk and talk and talk and talk about the problem. A leader has to arise that matches the leadership of government, and to be able to stand toe to toe and to debate the ideas, but also to gain the confidence of the people. After all is said and done, it rises and falls on leadership. Eric Williams stood up in Trinidad and said, Massa Day is done. And so somebody has to personalize and embody what the movement is saying. And I think unless you accept that as a matter of fact, we can talk here until the cows come home. And I'm not saying that I'm advocating for those things necessarily, but I'm stating it as a matter of fact. And you can say we can be anti-government as much as we want to, and we can say all of the bad things and so on. And I'm not saying that you're right or wrong on those things. But those people believe that they have a leader, and they listen to that voice, and they follow that voice. Hitler was a leader, and the people followed his voice. So there is the critical role of leadership. And you talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. That's what's in the room. We're all avoiding that because we don't want to challenge the status quo. And so we're avoiding that. But and you talk about the trade unions and all of that. I heard your name on the news during that time, but the person who symbolized, the person who stood out as the leader of the movement was Charles Savary. He was the one we heard on the radio. He was the voice. Yes, there were other people with him, but didn't that most probably point to the fact that he was an effective leader, that he would rally all of his people to the cause, and then they trusted him to be their voice. They trusted him to be their voice in the wilderness. Where is the voice in the wilderness? Okay, you call for a demonstration in Roseau and 10 people. Listen to me. He who leadeth and no one followeth is only taking a walk. I rest my case.
Excellent. Anybody want to jump in?
Well, I just want to say tonight's discussion has been very interesting. A lot of eloquence, a lot of passion. I think that's very healthy. But yes, I know. I have always learned that a leader, you judge a leader not by what he does or say, but by his followers, right? So some good question we'll ask tonight. Mr. Gregoire, I just want to take the opportunity to maybe give my closing remarks that I really think that the idea of discussing democracy, talking about the different types of democracies, talking about the Grand Bay election. I'm looking at the Facebook there, and some people are making some notice They're saying that the Granby people will listen to the PM and does what the PM want. Some other people are saying that the Granby people should stand up. So there are a lot of different views about the Granby issue. But I'm also happy that we were able to make some recommendations. Of course, Dr. Irving Andre bring up what Mr. Rosie Douglas talked about. And uh, and of course, we talked about the different term limits, how we can probably have some constitutional reform for our government. And I was happy to bring in the idea of factor analysis. Yes, we did have confluence on that, that that likability is a factor, but absolutely not the main factor in Dominica. So those were my thoughts, Mr. Gregoire.
Thanks a lot for that, Dr. George. Let me just go over, since we started making closing remarks, we might as well continue making closing remarks. You know, the good hour, the good hour is upon us already, as it were. And but you see, you never exhaust those discussions because, I mean, there's so much more, I mean, that we can do because in the end, as Pastor Mitchell says, in the end, what you want is a solution, right? We know a lot of those things, but we need the solution. But I mean, every time we talk about solutions, I keep coming around to this money thing, you know, that is playing a part in the solution. And I'm wondering, for example, I know the thing has started in Granby already. I see things coming on my phone already, people dressed in red and so on. And you know, the leader of the Labour Party going to a council or something and saying, okay, that is the person I recommend. But I mean, I was thinking, as I said earlier, I thought it was the delegates from the constituency that made the recommendation. But it seems as though what is I'm getting here now is that the prime minister is recommending to the council as the person he wants. And then maybe the Granby people will go along. It's likely they will go along with it. We don't know. Or we don't see. But the fact of the matter is, I think discussions are very healthy, very, very healthy. And we need to let's not lose sight of the fact of what really happened in 79. Huh? I mean, Dr. Andre probably in the best position to tell us all about the details that happened there. But I lived it. I was an integral part of it. Yeah, very, very integral part of it. So I know a lot about it. And I will tell you the person who I think had the greatest influence at that time was this gentleman called Zaboka, Louis Benoit. If Charles Savre had said the port not working and Zaboka said, yes, the port working, the port will be working. I mean, you know that. There's Zaboka, Benoit, and Curtis Augustus, and Ali Gage, and those fellas. They decided whether the port was working or not Charles Savre. And as Alvin is saying, today you have a Dominica Association of Teachers, you have the DPSU, you have the Police Welfare Association, you have so many, the Nurses Association. And in those, it was just one organization. So when he spoke, he was speaking for all of the public servants at that time. But certainly, and I'll tell you something else. A lot of people are forgetting something, you know, that 47-day strike, you know what embodied Charles Savre in there? 131% salary increase. Who wouldn't go out for 131% salary? If they tell people in Dominica today, listen, we're going out for 150%. You think anybody stayed home? But we're talking about 1%, right? We're talking about 2%. That is what the thing is now. Well, in those days, we were talking 131%. I think they ended up getting 121% or something like that. Eugenia had to end up paying it. Maybe Dr. Andre can tell us about that. But let me just go over to you, Alvin, to get your closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. G. And again, let me say thank you to our many listeners and callers who called this evening. Like it's been said, let all views contend. And I think the debate was very lively, very enlightening, as Dion said. I agree with that entirely. Let me say too, though, that, and you mentioned it, Mr. G, that, you had people like Zaboka and quite a few other people at the time who were part of the movement. I'm in no way dismissing leadership or even the question of the suggestion of civics or even the question of some aspect of likability. But I think, as Irving said earlier, we got to look at this thing from a much broader context as far as what is happening on the ground. I'm hopeful, though, however. I'm very hopeful. If I tell you I'm not hopeful, that's not the case. I am hopeful that at some point in time. When is that some point in time? A year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? I don't know. But I'm hopeful that our young people and Dominicans in general, both in Dominica and at home, will recognize where our country is going and will do something about it. We will all agree, whether we live in Georgia, whether we live in Washington, D.C., Canada, wherever it is, certain aspect of what's taking place in Dominica is not the right way to go. On the program last week, I shared with the listeners what the GDP, per capita GDP is like in some of the islands. And Dominica was way down rock bottom. I mean, it's not where we would all would like to see it. But I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that young people will come to some realization. The politics of today, one may argue, not the politics of yesterday. In our days of protest, did we have cell phones? I don't recall. Smartphones, video chat, and all this kind of stuff. Technology has brought us to some extent where we are today. And to what extent young people and the organization embrace that technology to bring about that change that is needed. So I'm very hopeful. Again, it's always a privilege for me, I just say, to share some of my views and to express some of my thoughts process with Dominicans who are listening in Dominica and overseas. And at the end of the day, I think by the end of the day, I think we want what is better. Over, as I said, our 43rd year of independence, I would hope all the best for Dominica, Nature Island of the Caribbean.
Yes, and thank you for that, Alvin. I have to just say, though, two things. That one, I am very happy that Pastor St. Clair Mitchell was able to join us tonight. He brought in other points of view into the conversation, and it created a lot more discussion, in-depth discussion. I'm very, very happy for it. And as we know, all views must always contend. This is what democracy is all about, and this is what this program is all about. One of the things, as Alvin mentioned as he was presenting, I'm going to come to you, Pastor Mitchell. Alvin mentioned something about our anniversary celebrations. One of the things that we're looking to do in collaboration with NJAM is on next Tuesday, which is the 2nd. In other words, on the eve of our National Day, we're going to be asking people to send in a little 5-minute salutation for Dominica, to say, look, what Dominica has meant to me, where it came from, where it's now, what my vision for it over the next 7 years going into our 50th anniversary of it. When we turn 50, I think it would be a nice thing to have people call in and not just to say what they think is wrong, but to say what they think can be right. And to just, we'll hopefully have a nice panel, have a nice discussion, but I want to get some voice insights. I think I may have sent it to some of you here, a little request. So you might want to look at that. So it's next Tuesday at 7 o'clock on a special edition of the Global View on Q. We will sort of try to do a salutation, a tribute to Dominica. You know, it's not perfect, with all its faults and so on, but we need to do that. So we will try to do that on the eve of Independence Day. But I want to go over to you to do your closing remarks, Pastor Mitchell.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with among this distinguished group of people here this evening. Obviously, I count it an honor, and like I said, I don't deserve to be here, but I thank God for the opportunity. I think what we need, whether you're left or right, is the ability to lead and to communicate change. And we would have to accept that based on what the people of Dominica voted for, that they believe that one party, as opposed to another, is better at communicating change to them. The challenge for the opposition has to be, how do we lead and communicate the change that we want in such a way that the masses of the people will believe in us? And so a leader has to be found that has that ability. that has the gravitas, that has the charisma, that has the likability, as small as it may be, based on what everyone has said here tonight, that has the character to lead that change. And unless that is done, my friend, I am sorry to say that we will be here 10 years from now talking about the same things. I agree that money plays a very important role. And I am also in agreement with the fact that those are laws that needs to be looked at so you can have a greater sense of fairness in the arena of politics as far as people choosing who is going to represent them. But going back to talking about Charles Savre, you say Zabulka or whatever the man's name was, Charles was able to convince him to be on his side. That's what leadership is about, is the ability to influence people and sometimes to get them to do things that they may not even necessarily like to do or want to do, but because they trust in you, because your passion is of such that they believe in the message that you're seeking to communicate to them, and they're willing to follow you. And unless we begin to take an objective look at that, and not a view that is just based on our political, our own persuasions, where we come to conclusions based on what we believe politically as opposed to what is factual. Like I said, I think we'll be here 10 years, 15 years from now, talking about the same things, just talking about the problems that exist. How do we lead and communicate change is a question for the opposition. And I'm giving them that as free advice. And I thank you tonight for allowing me this platform. Thank you so much. God bless you all.
Yeah, well, and thank you for coming into my presence. Yeah, I mean, we first time we're really meeting and having a discussion. Appreciate you for coming here tonight. And I just want to, as I go over to Dr. Andre, I just want to say this, you mentioned the question of money and the weight it plays in this politics, but, I can't help wondering, for example, if the Labour Party did not have as much money as they did in the last election, that all these people were not able to come in. And it was totally based on people in Dominica. I wonder what the results would have been. In other words,
why doesn't the opposition, for example, I mean, watch what's his name, Bernie Sanders. He was taking $25, and he raised more money than some of the guys who were getting monies from big corporations. Where again is the leadership? Okay, we don't have all of the money that the government has, so to speak. Why aren't they able, and why haven't they been able to rally the $25 and $25 if the population is so dissatisfied? If they're so dissatisfied, why aren't they buying into the message to such an extent that they would be able to give? Listen, I'm a leader. I raise lots of money to build orphanages in Africa and to do all kinds of things. Leadership is critical. One has to bring a certain passion and a certain conviction to their own message that causes other people to believe in it to the point where they would be able, they will in fact give sacrificially to a cause that is communicated to them by a leader. So yes, the government may have millions and millions of dollars. I think talking about that is not going to help the opposition. What they need to do is to strategize. Okay, we don't have we don't have the same resource that they have and the same sources that they have, like Bernie Sanders said, but we will take $25 here, $25 there, 20, and he raised huge sums of money, and in some instances more than those who were receiving money from major corporations. So that, to me, is still not an excuse. The problem, in fact, it further exposes the weakness of leadership in the opposition.
Yes, and what I would add to that, to bring a little bit more clarity to it, is that when we think about Bernie Sanders and millions of people in America are contributing $25, it's not the same as maybe 10,000 people in Dominica contributing $25. I don't think you'll arrive at the same sum as what Bernie Sanders raised because the population is just not there, right? Now, secondly, it will take a lot of $25 to reach $72 million. This is what I understand was spent by the by the governing body. It will take a lot of $25 contributions to reach that. If you're talking about a population of 70,000 people, and half of the people support one side or the other, half of them are children, half are elderly people who are not working. So the actual population that has that kind of disposable income, maybe about 20,000 people that might be supporting the opposition side that are working and has that kind of income. 25, a little 25. And the thing is that the people who already have that kind of income, I mean, we have to be realistic about this, I mean, people are hand to mouth, it is tough. When you think about dumb like bills and your electric telephone bills and mapping bills and gas bill, the price of gas, they don't have that much disposable income. Of course, I'm not going to try to answer for the opposition as what they should do to organize, to raise their money. They should make efforts to raise money. But I just see it might be a little difficult to raise 70 million if you're counting on, say, 10 to 20,000 people to chip in 25. So they might have to go way beyond that to raise that kind of money to be competitive. But with that as it may, I think it's all good. It is good to have all those topics on the table. Dr. Andre, we're giving you the final word tonight because you're the youngest fellow there.
I think that distinction probably belongs to Dr. George and Dr. Mitchell. But let me congratulate the panelists. They've all made excellent contributions, although I disagree with some in a very fundamental way. The discussion has ended with almost a focus on leadership. In fact, Dr. Mitchell has indicated that the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the absence of leadership from the opposition. Dr. Mitchell ironically said that leaders have to stand up to debate issues. Dr. Mitchell, do you appreciate the irony of that position? Do you appreciate the irony of the position considering who has refused to debate? Over 10 to 15 years, who refused to debate?
That assumes that I'm taking a position, though. I'm not taking a position. I'm just stating the fact.
Well, I don't know what fact you're saying, because in fact,
program here tonight to advocate
is the Prime Minister who's refused to debate. But I hope you let me finish my point, though.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I know you're good at those statements. I'm saying that assumes.
I'm good at those statements, but that's what you said. I'm good at repeating what you said, for God's sakes.
Isn't it a fact, though, that they have to debate? Isn't it a fact that debate is good?
It's a fact that the person who has refused to debate is the Prime Minister. If you don't think it's a fact, Zafe Dosa, it's a clear fact. But not only that, your conception of leadership is based on this all-encompassing leader like Charles Savre, an autocrat, to be quite frank with you. You should know that leadership takes different forms. That at this critical juncture, what's happening is that a number of leaders are coming forward, and hopefully they will coalesce and join together in this one holy enterprise of seeking to rescue Dominica from the state of illegality that now consumes it. We have youth leaders coming to the fore. We have all the leaders who've expressed concerns about what's happening. We don't necessarily subscribe to this one leader, this one encompassing leader who will take the country to the promised land. That is an autocratic conception of leadership. So what you lament is that we do not have an autocratic leader like Charles Savre. Well, it will take another program to go into that discussion. But the fact of the matter is there are people who are expressing views, who are taking action to support their contention that all is not well in the state of Denmark. And in my respectful view, that is a wonderful thing. In my respectful view, that is evidence of democracy working beautifully. In my respectful submission, that is evidence that no one person, no messiah, no autocrat has all the answers to the problems that plague us.
Nobody said that.
That is a process that should be continued. And that's the point.
You're a good Lord.
That's the point in my respectful view you are missing. You're saying because we don't have a Charles Savre, then the problem is leadership.
That is
note my point earlier.
Mr. G, you should allow me to respond to that. That is not what I'm saying. saying
Note
child
my point earlier. Note my
child
point earlier. You
protective
are dumping on the opposition, but you have nothing negative to say about the political directorate that is eviscerating every institution of good governance in Dominica. You have nothing to say about that. In my respectful view, my friend, you should take a good, hard look at the positions that you advance, because you are dumping on the opposition and you are not factoring in any way, shape, or form the deliberate and calculated evisceration and destruction of institutions of good governance. Therein, in my respectful view, lie the Achilles heel of your position. It is not reflective of the reality. It is not balanced. And quite frankly, it raises serious concerns about some of the positions you've taken. That's my view.
Yes, of course. I know you want to say something, and
I mean, all I said was that Charles Savary was an effective leader in his time. I wasn't subscribing to autocratic leadership. I've never done that tonight. All I've done is stated facts. And unless you're willing to look in the mirror and to see where your weaknesses are, then you will continue to be on this program and other programs talking about what you don't like. I was just giving you free advice. That's all. Giving you.
That's so generous, Dr. Mitchell, giving me free advice.
Thank you very much for the compliment, because I was just giving you free advice. That's all. But I've not assumed a political position here tonight. We were called to talk about likability and leadership. And I stayed to those facts. And I was giving you free advice.
I appreciate the free advice, Dr. Mitchell, but the fact of the matter is your comments were slanted, and you didn't address the fundamental problems that Dominica faced today, which is to say the wanton disregard and breach of Dominica's laws of governance.
I did address it when I said to you.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry.
If so many people in Dominica subscribe to your particular view, why aren't they through the ballot box, and why aren't they through things like demonstrations, voicing their opinions? Why aren't they doing it? If they subscribe, and I also said to you, it might be because you're talking past the people. And what I explained to you was it may be that there is a need for effective leadership. I've not assumed a political position on this program tonight. In fact, I did.
Okay, wonderful. But it may be because of what the Salisbury people were subjected to, Dr.
I was
Mitchell.
never asked about the Salisbury
people. The indiscriminate, you are making a point that it may be because leadership is missing. It may be because of the autocratic manifestation of power by the state, tear gassing innocent people in the dead of night, even elderly people. That is a cause why, quite frankly, we are in this thing together. This ruthless exercise of state power. Don't be afraid to talk about that, Dr. Mitchell, because you haven't spoken about it at all. You have avoided it like the plague. And therein, in my respectful view, lie the fundamental problem with your presentation. It's all the opposition. The opposition didn't do this, the opposition didn't do that, but not a single word with respect to the perils of governance which plague us today.
I told you tonight that I am a law-abiding citizen, and I think the government and the opposition and everyone should abide by the laws. I told you about voting, that I would not come to Dominica to vote. I even agreed with your view that having representation from the diaspora with 2 or 3 people and us voting there. I agreed with that also. So I don't know what else. You're looking to convince me to a particular political opinion that I am not willing to accept. And so you may be the one who is being autocratic because you're trying to force down my throat what your analysis is, and I'm not going to accept that. I've got
to be honest with you, I'm not trying to convince you of anything, to be quite frank. To suggest that I'm being autocratic is a joke. What I'm saying is your views reflect a fundamental bias, a bias that does not reflect the reality in Dominica. That's the problem I have with your views. They totally disregard what is happening in Dominica with respect to the issue of governance. And quite frankly, I think that type of myopia is very concerning to me. But rest assured that I'm not trying to convert you. Quite frankly, I wouldn't even try, because you are obviously set in your ways. So
So
Don't be
are you,
frightened.
are you saying
Don't be frightened. I'm not trying to convert you at all. It would
are
be
you
an exercise in futility.
was that the
Dr.
effort?
Mitchell.
Was that the effort tonight? The effort tonight was to convert me to a particular view, or did I come here to speak what my views were on
No.
particular subjects?
The effort tonight was to rebut
Do you think
the
you think that
problems,
you
the submissions that you made. That was the effort, to
do you
show
think
the
you
other
have to
side, to rebut your position.
No,
I'm not
let
trying to
me
convince you of anything. In fact,
let
I
me
think
see.
it would be a waste of time.
listen to me? Listen to me.
Let me see
I,
what let me see what the effort.
just let me say finally, and then I will
No,
allow.
I'm gonna give you a chance, but I just want to clarify something.
Yeah,
The effort here tonight was to put all ideas on the table. I don't think
I hope
anybody
so.
came
I
there
hope
with
so.
the intention of convincing anybody to do anything or to change your views.
I
But
certainly hope so.
one of the things I wanted to put again to you, because I think that's an important consideration. I did mention it, but you probably may have missed it when I said it. I asked us the simple question is, when you mentioned about the money and Bernie and so on, I said, I wonder whether in fact all the Dominicans who came in from the States and Canada and Guadeloupe and Martinique and Antigua, if they had not come in, what would we have said about the leadership if that drastically changed the results of the election? If, for example, the number of seats won and lost drastically changed just because that component was not there. You understand what I'm saying? So
I
then
understand what you.
what does that do with our notion of leadership and so on, if in fact that is what created the difference in the result?
Yeah.
You see, like, that's a fundamental point.
And the big thing here is if you can present to me, if you can show me an analysis that proves the point that you're making, I would say that that's wrong. And listen to me. You called us, you say you like all views to contend, but I've always learned that one has a weak point when they resort to name calling and to being personal and to personally criticize someone else on the panel of being myopic and all of that stuff. I have not called anyone any names here because I rely on the strength of the argument that I make. I'm not on resorting to name callings because I get all emotional and upset because someone else has an opposing view to my view. So now I need to call them names. You may get a certain kind of gratification in doing that, but certainly it doesn't affect me in any way, shape, or form, except to make that kind of to make the observation. I have not resorted to name calling. I respect everyone on this panel very greatly, and I think, like I said, I listen to your program every Tuesday night, and I appreciate the intellectual capital that that's why I listen to the program. It's very intellectually stimulating. But to resort to name calling, and condescension in my mind doesn't make the point.
All right,
And
let me just say this.
Mr. Gregoire, I think I have to respond.
Yes,
My
I know.
view was that Dr. Mitchell's views were myopic. I stand by that decision. I have given reasons why I thought they were myopic, because quite frankly, as I said, they do not reflect the reality on the ground. They do not reflect the issues and perils of good governance that we face today. They do not reflect what's happening in terms of the institutions of governance. I have the right to decide or to refer to those views espoused by Mr. Mitchell as being myopic. To suggest that this is some personal attack, with the greatest of respect, that's just not true. Mr. Mitchell has to understand that his views will not go unchallenged. Certainly not from Irving Andre, I'll tell you that much. And he has espoused certain views which I strongly opposed, and I maintain the right to bring that to his attention. If he thinks I'm trying to convert him, then Zafe Doisa. But that is the last thing I'm trying to do. I am advancing my position without any difficulty whatsoever.
Let me just quickly make a quick intervention, if you'd allow me to.
A lot, but I must say, no, but I think it's unfair to Alvin because I gave you Irving and Pastor Michelle much extra time.
I'll take Dion's spot. Dion yields to me, so I have my spot plus Dion's spot.
No, I want to give the benediction.
Okay, so Alvin, go ahead. Let's try to wrap up.
Let me say very quickly, Mr. G. To him, much is given, much is expected. We've heard that before, right? Pastor Mitchell? To him, much is given, much is expected. And I think what I think we need to understand, and I may have said that on previous programs that you invited me to, Mr. G. We have a situation now where persons in Dominica, outside of Dominica, are not bold and brave enough to question or to pinpoint the pitfalls of the governance of Dominica. And there's only one political party now that's governing Dominica, that's the Labour Party under the leadership of Roosevelt Skerritt. And while it may be true that the opposition, the question of leadership and strategy may whatever, we have a government in office that is performing in a manner that is wrong. And some of us pay a blind eye to it. We tend to focus on the opposition. The opposition don't have strategy. The opposition not likable. The opposition don't have the leadership. And while that may be true, let us understand this Prime Minister says in his own words, and you can go back in the records, and every one of us could go and fact check, as they would say, no law, no constitution will prevent him to do what he has to do. And I'm saying we must speak to that. This Prime Minister has dismantled the IPO. This is a creature of the Constitution that was set up so that politicians on both sides of the house and persons in private sector would disclose their assets. So tomorrow, if somebody decides to put up themselves for election, we will know what you come in with, what you're living with. The Prime Minister dismantled that. We need to point out the ills, like this poet or this what was it who said, when they came for the Jew, you didn't speak out. When they came for this one, you didn't speak out. When they came for this one, you didn't speak out. Now, when they come for you, what are you going to say? And I think we need to speak to the ills. We need to be aware of what's happening. And while at the same time we can say or indicate the question of leadership on the other side, we need to say, well, hey, this is my understanding of what's happening, and this is wrong. We can't play like we don't know or play like we don't want to get involved. Oh, well, Skerritt has great leadership style, so that's why he can attract the people. There are things that have been done and said which is wrong. It is just fundamentally wrong. And I think until such time we get to that point, then, as you might say, we'll continue talking, but I will end again by saying I have hope. I have hope in young people that one day change will come. Like the song of Sammy David, change is going to come. Change is going to come. One day change will come.
And I think this is a time for Dr. Dion George to give us the benediction that he wanted to give us for so long. That's the time. Let us have it, Dion, and get us out of here.
Yes, man. I just want to thank everybody. I really appreciate the eloquence and the passion of this show tonight. May God bless us and keep us, and may his light shine upon us. Have a good evening, gentlemen.
Amen. And thanks a lot.
Good evening to all the panelists, your listeners, Mr. G. Lambie, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Irving, I really want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you, Pastor Mitchell.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone.
Great contribution. I mean, as I said in the beginning,
my fellow Portsmouth man here.
Yeah. As I said, don't expect everybody.
Pastor, you shouldn't take these things personally, my friend. The fact that someone defends his views is not a personal attack on you, my friend.
I promise you, after this show, everything is water under the bridge. I'm
happy you feel that way, because I certainly feel that way. And as I've said on the record, I respect what you've done with your life.
Excellent.
Mutual, my friend. I respect what you've done with your life also.
You know, but again, as I said, when two hard-headed guys butt up in terms of diametrically opposed views.
From
And
Portsmouth.
our fathers
But
were
anyway,
both best of friends. So
well, I can tell you that's how I look at it. And
Right.
as I said, I certainly had no intention of attacking you personally when I
no,
said it's
man,
my opinion.
no, you don't have to mention that. In the realm
you
of
know,
debate, we debate in
and,
the realm of debate. Outside of debate, we are friends. We're
so
from
it's all
Portsmouth together.
good, and
No
I
love
will
is
still
lost there.
continue. I'll still continue to respect you, and in the best traditions of Whitney Houston, I will always love you.
The feelings,
All right.
what I tell you.
I think we're getting too sentimental right now.
I think so. I'm getting worried about you now. As a matter of fact,
Mr. G, I'm revealing some of my inner secrets.
I just wanted to say, Pastor Mitchell, that I mean, we really didn't have much time for you to talk about the things that you do. And maybe
Yeah.
some of the time I'll want you to come back and let's talk about what you actually do.
Absolutely.
I know that you're doing quite a bit. Okay, so I want to thank everybody for coming here tonight and all of our listeners and our callers, who many of them did not get to call. In fact, we are having some tech difficulties. But I mean, it was all good. And I'm looking forward to having another discussion again. And next week, I'm hoping that I can really, in fact, we're honoring Patrick John, posthumously on Monday. And then on Tuesday night, we're looking at, getting people coming and saluting Dominic on the 43rd anniversary. I think it's a good time to bring the country together on the eve of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, gentlemen, good night. And thanks a
Good
lot.
night,
Good night, gentlemen. Okay, Pastor Mitchell, Dion.
God bless you all.
Mr.
Yes.
J, all the best, and we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thanks,
Good night, folks
All
on
right.
Facebook. Good night.
Take care. All right.